Hermione Granger sat hunched over a crumbling grimoire bound in what looked like yew bark, her fingers smudged with ink and dust. Moonlight slanted through the high arched windows, casting silver stripes across the table, illuminating the motes that danced in the cold air. She rubbed her temples, the words on the page blurring into a sea of archaic script. She'd been at it for hours, since dinner really, and the cipher she'd been deciphering still refused to yield its meaning. It was maddening. A series of interlocking runes, none of which matched any known magical language in the Hogwarts archives. She flexed her left hand, wincing at the stiffness in her fingers. That was when she saw it. A faint silver shimmer, like liquid mercury beneath the skin of her wrist. She blinked. It pulsed once, soft, deliberate, and then began to move. Her breath caught. The shimmer coiled slowly, spiraling outward in a precise, intricate pattern, etching itself across her skin as though drawn by an invisible quill dipped in starlight. She jerked back from the table, knocking over a stack of books, but the movement didn't stop. The rune, no, not just one, now she saw was forming more, layering into a complex rotating cipher that glowed with an inner luminescence. It wasn't burning, wasn't cutting, but its star-tingled star, a deep, resonant hum that vibrated up her arm and settled in her ribs. "Lumos?" she whispered, waving her wand over her wrist. The light flared, but the cipher absorbed it, glowing brighter for a moment, before returning to its steady pulse. She tried hominum revelo, then finite incantic, even the parselton the mocking charm she'd painstakingly learned last year. Nothing. The magic didn't react. It didn't even flicker. Her heart thudded against her sternum. This wasn't accidental magic. This wasn't accidental star. Anything star. It was deliberate. Ancient. She could feel star its weight. As though the runes were not just inscribed on her skin, but threaded into her blood. She reached for her wand again, voice steadier now. Revelio cryptum. The spell fizzled against her wrist like rain on stone. She stared at the glowing spiral, her breath shallow. It was beautiful, in a terrible way, like moonlight on a frozen river, like a spell carved by hands, long turned to dust. And it was spreading. Slowly, infinitesimally, the outermost rune began to rotate, shifting into a new configuration. A new symbol emerged, angular and unfamiliar, and with it came a whisper, not in her ears, but in her bones. A single word, echoing from nowhere, and everywhere. Star. Malfoy. Star. She froze. No, that wasn't possible. It couldn't be. The name had slithered through the cipher itself, spoken in a voice that wasn't her own. She slammed the grimoire shut, the sound too loud in the stillness, and shoved her sleeve down over the mark. Her hands trembled. She needed answers, but more than that, she needed to know why her skin was whispering a name she hadn't thought of in months, why her magic refused to touch this thing, and why, when she pressed her fingers to the pulse beneath the glow, it beat in time with a rhythm that felt familiar. And worst of all, why, deep in her gut, a part of her already knew it wasn't going to let go. The library air was thick with dust and quiet scholarship when the cipher first stirred. Hermione Granger sat hunched over a crumbling volume on pre-Hogwarts ward magic, her fingers tracing the margin notes she'd scribbled days ago. The parchment was cool beneath her skin, but it was nothing compared to the heat that suddenly flared along her forearm. She gasped. The intricate pattern etched into her skin, dozens of shifting runes that had appeared without explanation 3 nights prior, began to writhe, not painful but deeply unsettling, like ants crawling beneath translucent silk. The symbols, angular, ancient, utterly unfamiliar, spun and reformed, their silver-blue lumescence pulsing in time with her heartbeat. Hermione jerked her sleeve down instinctively, glancing around. Madame Pince was at the far end, reshelving, and a pair of third-year Hufflepuffs whispered over herbology notes near the window. No one had seen, or so she thought. Then Draco Malfoy passed the study table. He didn't stop, didn't look, just strode past in his usual measured way, robes brushing the stone floor, heading toward the restricted section with a scroll clutched in one pale hand. But the moment he drew level with her, the cipher star reacted star. It flared, bright, urgent, its light bleeding through the fabric of her sleeve. The runes shifted violently, rearranging into a new configuration that hummed against her skin, almost vibrating. Hermione froze, breath caught in her throat, and Draco stopped. He turned slowly, gray eyes narrowing. His gaze dropped to her covered arm. "Granger," he said, voice low. "What was that?" "Nothing," she said too quickly, tugging her sleeve further down. He took a step closer. "That wasn't nothing. I felt it, like static, in my teeth." She stared at him. "You felt star?" Before he could answer, Professor McGonagall appeared, as if conjured by tension alone, her emerald robes sharp against the dim library light. "Is there a problem here?" she asked, eyes flicking between them. Hermione opened her mouth, but Draco spoke first. "Granger's arm just lit up when I walked by." McGonagall's expression didn't change, but something in her posture tightened. "Show me." Reluctantly, Hermione pushed up her sleeve. The cipher glowed faintly now, the runes still, but the air around it shimmered slightly, like heat above stone. McGonagall exhaled through her nose. "I feared this might happen." She looked at Draco. "Mr. Malfoy, place your hand over the mark." He blinked. "What? Do it." Hesitant, Draco reached out. His fingers hovered just above the glowing script. The moment his warmth touched the space above her skin, the cipher star responded star, the runes spiraling inward, then flaring outward like a ripple in water. A soft chime, almost musical, filled the space between them. Hermione shivered. Draco's hand jerked back. "What in Merlin's name?" "It's reactive," McGonagall said, voice grave. "That it's chosen you, Mr. Malfoy, whether you like it or not." "Chosen?" Hermione whispered. "Chosen for star. What star?" "That," McGonagall said, "is what you two are going to find out. Together," Draco recoiled. "Absolutely not. I'm not." "My father will never allow me into the ancestral vaults." "Then you'll go without his permission," McGonagall said. "Because if we don't act, Miss Granger may not have the time to wait for polite invitations." Hermione swallowed. The cipher pulsed once gently, as if in agreement. Draco met her eyes. No words, just a long silent look that carried the weight of every insult, every war, every year between them. And then, barely audible, he said, "Fine. But I'm not doing this for you." "No," Hermione said softly. "You're doing it because the magic won't let you walk away." He didn't argue, and that more than anything scared her. The air in the abandoned Charms classroom was thick with dust and tension, sunlight slicing through cracked shutters in diagonal shafts that illuminated motes, dancing like reluctant spirits. Hermione stood with her back to the blackboard, arms crossed, her left forearm bared where the cipher shimmered faintly beneath the skin, its runes shifting like eels in moonlit water. Draco leaned against the teacher's desk, one hand braced on the wood, the other gripping his wand as if it might betray him. "This is absurd," he muttered, eyes fixed on the pulsing glow. "It's not even a real spell. It's some cursed scribble." "It's magic," Hermione corrected, voice clipped. "And it reacts. You saw it flare when you said star lumos star yesterday. It didn't do that for McGonagall, for Pomfrey, or even for Harry." Draco exhaled sharply through his nose. "So I'm your personal magic detector now? How flattering." "You're the only one it responds to," she said, stepping forward. "Which means we test. Now. Before someone notices and decides to lock me in St. Mumgo's for observation." He pushed off the desk, circling her like a wary predator. And if its star hurts, star you would I cast near it? It hasn't yet. But it might. His voice lowered. And then whose fault would that be? Hermione met his gaze. Yours, obviously. So be careful. A flicker of something. Annoyance? Concern? Passed over his face. He raised his wand, pointed at the ceiling. Star Lumos star. The tip flared. And the Cipher star burned star. Hermione gasped, clutching her arm as the runes flared gold, then deep to crimson, swirling faster. Heat crawled up her veins like liquid fire, brief but searing. She staggered back, breath ragged. Granger, Draco dropped the wand, stepping toward her. Are you, on star fine star? She snapped her. She snap. It's trembling. And you're overreacting. She flexed her fingers, wincing as the woe beneath her skin dimmed to a dull pulse. But, it responded, stronger than before. Draco retrieved his wand slowly. Maybe we shouldn't do this. We star have star too. She rolled down her sleeve, jaw set. This thing appeared after I touched that scroll in the restricted section. No one knows what it is. No one's ever seen anything like it. And if it's tied to blood magic, Malfoy blood, from the look of those sigils, then you're not just involved. You're star, central star. He flinched at the mention of his name in connection with the cipher. My family doesn't dabble in cursed tattoos. It's not a tattoo, she said gently. It's a resonance, like a key seeking its lock. And for some reason, your magic fits. Silence settled between them, heavy and uncertain. The shutter creaked in the breeze. A beetle skittered across the floorboards. Draco turned away. Try a non-verbal, he said. Something simple. Star Wingardium Leviosa star. In that is star. He nodded and frowned. On what? On star that star. He nodded toward a chipped inkwell on the desk. She raised her wand, focused, and pushed the thought forward. Star up star. The star won. The inkwell trembled, lifted an inch, then shattered mid-air as the cipher erupted in violent blue light. Ink sprayed across the wall in a jagged arc. Hermione cried out, dropping to her knees, her arm cradled against her chest. Grayo was at her side in 2 strides. Hermione. She looked up, startled by the use of her first name. So was he. He froze, then crouched beside her, voice tight. Does it follow star my star magic, or star me star? She swallowed. I don't know. He stared at her arm, where the light now pulsed in slow, rhythmic waves, like a heartbeat syncing with something unseen. Try it again, he whispered. But this time, let me cast with you. She hesitated. Together? It's either that, he said, raising his wand beside hers, or we spend the next month dodging questions while you turn into a walking fireworks display every time I sneeze. Their wands hovered, parallel, inches apart. Hermione took a breath. On 3. 1, 2. They cast in unison. Star Wingardium Leviosa. Star. The feather from the desk lifted, smoothly, gently, rising like a dandelion seed on a breeze. The cipher glowed, not painfully, but warmly, its runes settling into a steady, harmonious spiral. Hermione exhaled. Draco didn't lower his wand. It's not the spell, he said slowly. It's the star combination star. Your magic, mine, together. She turned to him, eyes wide. Then it's not a curse. No, he murmured. It's something older, something deliberate. And in that quiet, ink-stained room, with their wands still raised and the cipher humming between them like a secret, finally waking, neither of them dared to ask what it meant. The air in Professor Vector's arithmancy classroom was thick with the scent of chalk dust and simmering ink. Hermione sat rigid in her seat, quill poised, eyes fixed on the parchment before her, yet not seeing the numbers scrawled across it. Beneath the long sleeve of her robe, her forearm burned with a slow, insistent pulse like a heartbeat beneath her skin. She had grown used to the cipher's presence since it first appeared 2 weeks ago, coiled around her wrists like a serpent made of light. But today it was different. Its star moved star. She still had self as 2 souls. She shifted slightly, pressing her elbow closer to her side, trying to hide the tremor in her hand. A flicker of gold and deep indigo threaded through the runes, shimmering just beneath the surface of her skin. They slid and twisted, rearranging themselves like letters in a scrambled spellbook. Her breath caught. This had never happened during daylight, never while she was awake and surrounded by others. Across the room, Draco Malfoy looked up from his calculations. His gray eyes, sharp and guarded, caught the faint glow escaping the edge of Hermione's rolled cuff. He stilled. For a moment, the only sound was the scratch of quills and the distant hum of the enchanted blackboard, correcting itself. Then the cipher flared, softly but unmistakably, and reformed into a new pattern, a spiral of angular symbols, one of them a sharp angular crest that sent a chill down Draco's spine. He knew that mark. It was the Malfoy sigil, but not as it appeared on their crest or monogram. This was older, cruder, etched in a hand that predated the family's polished heraldry by centuries. His fingers tightened around his quill, snapping it in two. "Is something the matter, Mr. Malfoy?" Professor Vector asked, glancing up. "No," he said, voice low. "Just a broken quill." But his eyes remained locked on Hermione. She felt it, the weight of his stare, the sudden shift in the air between them. She risked a glance. His face was pale, lips pressed into a thin line, and his gaze was fixed not on her face, but on her arm. Her pulse quickened. She tugged her sleeve down, but it was too late. He had seen. The bell rang, dismissing the class. Students packed their bags with groans and chatter, but Hermione moved slowly, deliberately, as if gathering her things could buy her time. She wasn't ready for this conversation. Draco didn't leave. He lingered at the back of the room, leaning against the stone wall, arms crossed. When the last student had filed out, he spoke. "Show me." "No. You think I don't know what I saw." His voice was quiet, edged with something between anger and fear. "That symbol, it's not supposed to exist. Not outside the vault." She looked up then, meeting his eyes. "What vault?" "The one beneath Malfoy Manor. The ancestral archive. It's sealed with blood magic. Only a Malfoy can open it." He stepped forward, voice lowering. "And that mark? It's the key." Hermione swallowed. "So you're saying my arm is a star key star?" "I'm saying it's not random." He exhaled sharply. "Those runes, they're rearranging. Did you feel it?" She nodded. "They move during class, like they're responding to something. To me," he said flatly. "They only react when I'm near. You've noticed it too, haven't you? The warmth, the pulse. It's stronger when I'm close." She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Draco reached into his robe and pulled out a small silver locket, ancient, tarnished, engraved with the same symbol now glowing faintly beneath her sleeve. "My mother gave this to me before she died. Told me not to open it, told me it was meant for another time." He held it out. "I think she knew." Hermione stared at the locket. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because," he said, voice quieter now, "if your skin is a map, and that symbol is the key, then we're already on the path to something neither of us should have to face alone." Outside, the sky darkened with the first hints of twilight. A cold wind rattled the tall windows, and deep beneath the skin of her arm, the cipher pulsed once, gold flaring into crimson, before settling into a slow, steady rhythm. As if waiting, as if calling. The heavy oak door groaned as Draco pushed it open, the sound unnaturally loud in the hush of the west wing. Dust hung in the slanted afternoon light, motes swirling like trapped spirits above the floorboards. Hermione stepped in behind him, her breath shallow, fingers instinctively brushing the warm, pulsing cipher on her forearm. It had been restless all morning, the runes shifting like ink in water, and now it glowed faintly beneath her sleeve, a quiet hum beneath her skin. "This place hasn't been touched since my grandfather died," Draco said, his voice low, almost reverent. He flicked his wand at the sconces. Blue flames sputtered to life along the walls, casting long, trembling shadows across bookshelves, choked with leather-bound tomes and glass cases, filled with oddities, preserved roots and vials, a cracked astrolabe, a silver hand missing 2 fingers. Hermione moved toward a massive desk carved with serpentine flourishes. "Your family kept records on blood magic?" Draco's jaw tightened. "We kept records on everything. The Malfoys don't discard knowledge, no matter how distasteful." He hesitated, then added, "Just because we collected it doesn't mean we used it." She didn't answer. Her eyes were fixed on the small, unassuming journal, tucked beneath a broken quill. Its cover was unmarked, the spine cracked with age. As she reached for it, the cipher on her arm flared, a sudden bright pulse of gold, and then settled into a steady rhythm, like a heartbeat, Draco noticed. It reacted. "It knows," she whispered. He stepped closer, watching, as she opened the journal with careful hands. The pages were brittle, the ink faded to sepia, but the handwriting was precise, elegant. Hermione scanned the first entry. Star. The bonded cipher is not a curse, nor a charm. It is a memory, a vow written in blood and starlight, passed from one soul to another, when the veil between worlds grows thin. To bear it is to carry a thread of destiny, unraveled by time, but never broken. Star. Hermione's breath caught. "Draco, this sounds like it's describing us." He leaned over her shoulder, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him, smell the faint trace of cedar and old parchment clinging to his robes. His fingers hovered near the page, but he didn't touch it. "Keep reading," he said, voice barely above a whisper. She turned the page. "Star, the cipher seeks its counterpart. It will not manifest unless both are present in blood and spirit. One carries the script, the other the key. Only when the two are united by will, not force, can the truth be revealed. But beware, the bond demands sacrifice, not of life, but of self. To break it may kill the bearer. To fulfill it may change them both beyond recognition." Star. The room seemed to shrink. The flames in the sconces dimmed, as if the air itself had grown heavy. Hermione looked down at her arm. The runes were no longer shifting. They had settled into a single, ancient symbol, a spiral enclosed in a triangle like a sigil of old. "It's not just reacting to you," she said slowly. "It's waiting for you." Draco pulled back, his face pale. "That's impossible. My family didn't believe in fate." "Your grandfather did," she said, flipping to the next page. There, a sketch caught her eye. A pair of intertwined hands, one marked with a cipher, the other holding a wand tipped with the same spiral symbol. Beneath it, a name was scrawled in firmer ink: Star, Lyra, and Cassian. The first pair, Star. And beneath that, a single line: Star. The blood remembers what the mind forgets. Star. A cold draft slipped through the room, though no window was open. The journal trembled in Hermione's hands. Draco stared at the sketch. Cassian Malfoy. He was my great-great-grandfather. He disappeared. They said he fled to escape scandal. Hermione looked up at him, her eyes wide. What if he didn't flee? What if he was taken by the cipher? Silence stretched between them, fragile and charged. The weight of centuries pressed down, and for the first time, Draco didn't pull away when her fingers brushed his sleeve. "We need to find out what happened to them," she said. "Because if this is a bond, we might not be the first." The air in Malfoy Manor's west wing was thick with silence and the scent of old parchment, dust undisturbed for generations. Hermione stood with her back pressed against the cold stone wall, her breath shallow, eyes fixed on the ornate door before them. It wasn't locked, not in the conventional sense. There were no keyholes, no wards she could detect with standard spells. Yet the door remained sealed, its surface carved with what looked like ancient runes. Wrapped around a central crest, a serpent coiled around a quill, its eyes inlaid with chips of obsidian. "This is it," Draco murmured, stepping closer. He didn't touch the door, but his fingers twitched at his side, as if resisting the urge. "The family archives. My father always said only those with both Malfoy blood and someone. Attuned could open it." Hermione frowned. "Attuned? What does that even mean?" "I don't know," he admitted, voice low. "But the cipher on your arm, it reacted when we were near the library last night. It's not just a mark, it's a key." She rolled up her sleeve, revealing the shifting pattern of glowing runes that had appeared 3 days prior, first as a faint shimmer along her forearm, then deepening into something undeniable, alive. The symbols weren't static. They pulsed, rearranged themselves, as if breathing. And every time Draco came near, they flared brighter, humming just beneath her skin like a tuning fork struck in silence. "Try now," he said, stepping beside her. "Same spell, together." She nodded, raising her wand. "Aperio sanguis." Draco mirrored her, voice steady, despite the tension in his jaw. "Aperio anima." Their voices overlapped, wands pointed at the door. For a moment, nothing. Then the air between them thickened, charged like the moment before lightning strikes. A low resonance filled the corridor, vibrating through the stone beneath their feet. The obsidian eyes of the serpent on the door flickered. Once, twice. And then the entire frame began to glow with a soft silver light. The door cracked open with a sigh, releasing a breath of cool, dry air that smelled of ink, dried herbs, and time. Hermione stepped forward first, wand raised, light blooming at its tip. Draco followed, close enough that his shoulder brushed hers as they crossed the threshold. The library was vast, rows upon rows of towering oak shelves curved into shadowed alcoves, filled with books bound in leather, metal, even what looked like dragonhide. Scrolls were stored in crystal tubes mounted into the walls, glowing faintly with preserved enchantments. In the center of the room stood a circular dais, etched with a complex sigil that matched the pattern now crawling across Hermione's arm. She gasped. The cipher burned suddenly, not with pain, but with heat, deep, insistent. She clutched her forearm, dropping to one knee as the runes flared white-hot. Draco caught her before she fell, his hands firm on her shoulders. "Hermione, it's changing," she whispered. On her skin, new symbols emerged, delicate, spiraling glyphs she hadn't seen before, interwoven with the old. They formed a sequence that pulsed in time with her heartbeat. And then, beneath her breath, words surfaced in a language she didn't know, but somehow understood. The bond is seen, not broken. The blood remembers what the mind forgets. Star. Draco stared at the new markings, his face pale. "That's not Parseltongue. That's older than the Malfoys, older than Hogwarts." She looked up at him, eyes wide. "It's not just a cipher, is it?" "No," he said quietly. "It's a memory, a promise. And it's waking up. Somewhere deep in the library, a book fell from its shelf with a hollow thud, though neither of them had touched a thing. The air in the hidden archive beneath the Vienna catacombs was thick with the scent of old parchment and damp stone, each breath a slow draw through centuries of silence. Hermione traced the edge of a brittle scroll with trembling fingers, the ink barely visible beneath a film of time. The cipher on her forearm pulsed faintly, a warm ripple beneath her skin, reacting not to the scroll itself, but to Draco, who stood just behind her, his breath catching as the runes shifted into new configurations. "This isn't Malfoy's script," she whispered, eyes scanning the delicate sigils etched in faded indigo. "It predates your family by generations. Look, the branching pattern, the lunar modifiers. This is older than Salazar's time." Draco stepped closer, his shoulder brushing hers as he leaned in. "Then why does it respond to me? Why not some long-dead ancestor of yours?" "Because blood isn't always about name," she murmured, unfurling another fragment with careful precision. "It's about lineage, inheritance. This cipher, it's keyed to a bloodline, but not one that stayed within a single family. It was transferred, through marriage, through oath, through sacrifice." A chill settled between them as the truth began to unfold like the scrolls before them. Hermione's fingers stilled on a faded crest, twined serpents embracing an open book, crowned by a star with 7 points. Beneath it, a name, barely legible. Star Vespera. Lestrange, formerly black, bound by blood to House Tenebris. Star Lestrange. Draco breathed. "That's my great-aunt by marriage. But Tenebris, I've never heard of them." "Not surprising," Hermione said, her voice low with awe. "They were erased, purged from records after the War of Hollow Stars, considered too dangerous, their magic too intertwined with life forces, not just spells. They believed knowledge should be protected in flesh, not just parchment, so they bound their secrets into bloodlines. Their heirs didn't inherit vaults or titles. They inherited star runes. Star." She rolled up her sleeve, revealing the cipher glowing now in soft pulses, like a heartbeat. "This isn't a Malfoy secret, Draco. It's a Star Tenebris star cipher, and it's awakening because it recognizes your blood, but it's speaking to Star Me Star, because my blood carries something else." He turned to her, silver eyes, sharp with suspicion, and something deeper. Fear. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying the Black Line married into the Tenebris, and the Tenebris had a daughter, Aurelia, who vanished during the Purge. She fled to England, changed her name. took refuge in a family known for shielding outcasts. She paused, the weight of it pressing against her ribs. The Prewets, my mother's side. Draco stepped back as if struck. No, that can't be. You're Muggle-born. Only by upbringing, she whispered. Not by blood. My grandmother never spoke of it. But I found her journal in the attic last summer, just before all this started. She wrote about the old magic stirring in the child. She knew. She started a star and didn't tell me. The silence that followed was heavy with revelation. The cipher flared, runes spiraling faster, reacting to the truth as if it had waited centuries for this moment. Draco reached out, not touching her skin, but hovering just above the glowing script. So it's not just tied to me, he said, voice rough. It's tied to Star, not because of who we are now, but because of who they were. The Tenebrous wanted their knowledge preserved, but protected, buried in two bloodlines, split so neither could unlock it alone. Hermione nodded, heart pounding. One carries the key, one carries the lock, and only together do we complete it, Draco finished. Outside, a distant rumble echoed through the catacombs, like stone shifting in its sleep. Dust sifted from the ceiling. The candlelight flickered, and the cipher on Hermione's arm burned brighter, not with warning, but with recognition. Somewhere deep beneath Europe, something ancient had just begun to wake. Rain fell in silver sheets over the blackthorn woods, soaking through Hermione's cloak and chilling her to the bone. The ancient trees loomed like sentinels, their gnarled branches woven into a canopy so dense that even the moonlight hesitated to pass. Somewhere ahead, the cipher on her forearm pulsed, a slow, rhythmic throb of sapphire light, its runes shifting like whispered secrets. She stopped, breath curling in the damp air, and pressed her hand against the nearest tree. It's here, she said, voice barely above a whisper. I can feel it. Draco stood a few paces behind, his white blonde hair darkened by the rain, his jaw set. You said that at the last 3 ruins, and the one in Luxembourg. This is different, she insisted, lifting her arm. The cipher flared, its glow casting eerie shadows across her face. It's responding to something nearby, like it's awake. He stepped closer, eyes narrowing. Let me see. She hesitated only a moment before offering her arm. His fingers brushed her skin, cold, tentative, and the moment he touched her, the runes flared violently, twisting into a pattern neither of them had seen before. A low hum filled the air, rising from the earth itself, and the ground beneath their feet trembled. Draco snatched his hand back. Merlin's beard. What was that? The enchantment, Hermione breathed, staring at the pulsing script. It recognized you. It's been waiting for you. That's impossible. My family has no ties to what? Forgotten magic. Blood oaths older than Hogwarts? You don't know half of what your ancestors did in the dark. She turned, scanning the trees. It's close, the entrance. They moved forward in silence, the forest growing stranger with every step. The trees twisted into spirals, their bark etched with faint glowing symbols that matched the cipher. Roots writhed subtly beneath the loam, as though breathing. And then, ahead, a clearing. In its center stood a ruin, half swallowed by ivy and time. Stone arches, carved with serpentine script, framed a circular door sealed shut by a lattice of interlocking ruins. No handle, no keyhole, only a shallow basin carved into the stone, shaped like a handprint. Hermione approached slowly. This is it, the first trial. Draco scoffed. And how do we open it? Recite a poem? Sacrifice a firstborn? She ignored him, tracing the basin's edge. It's a bloodlock, but not just any blood. It needs both of us. His head snapped toward her. What? The cipher chose you, not me alone. It's binding us together. This enchantment knows it. She looked at him, her eyes steady. We have to place our hands on it. At the same time, he took a step back. You're mad. This could be cursed. It could kill us. Or it could be the only way to stop whatever this thing is doing to me. She rolled up her sleeve, revealing the cipher now crawling up toward her elbow, its glow deepening. It's spreading, Draco. I can feel it, like it's rewriting me from the inside. He stared at her arm, then at the basin. There has to be another way. There isn't. She held out her hand. Trust me, Just this once. He looked at her, really looked, and for the first time saw not the know-it-all Gryffindor, not Potter's shadow, but Hermione Granger, fierce, terrified, and utterly determined. A girl who'd faced dragons and dark lords, now standing at the edge of something older, and far more dangerous, and he realized he believed her. With a slow breath, he stepped forward and placed his hand in the basin. She mirrored him, their fingers not quite touching. The moment their palms met the stone, the runes ignited. A voice, ancient and layered, rose from the earth, speaking in a tongue long dead. The ground split open, vines recoiled, and the door groaned, its runes dissolving like ash in the wind. The cipher on Hermione's skin burned, once, sharply, and then settled, glowing softly, as if satisfied. Draco exhaled, trembling. "What in the name of Salazar?" She pulled her hand back, heart racing. "We're in." The air atop the astronomy tower was sharp with the bite of autumn, the kind that stunned the lungs and made breath curl like smoke in the moonlight. Hermione stood with her back against the cold stone, arms wrapped tight around herself, watching the silver light spill across her forearm. The runes, those impossible shifting symbols, pulsed gently beneath her skin, like a heartbeat, not her own. They had been silent for hours, dormant since breakfast, when they'd flared violently during transfiguration, causing her wand to rattle in her hand and McGonagall to pause mid-lecture. But now, under the full moon's gaze, they stirred. Draco stepped onto the tower's ledge with quiet precision, his boots barely making a sound on the worn flagstones. He carried no cloak, just his dark robes pulled close, wand gripped in pale fingers. He didn't speak at first. He never did when the cipher was active. Words were distractions, and distractions could be dangerous. "They're moving," Hermione whispered, holding out her arm. The runes spiraled slowly, like ink dropped in water, shifting from angular old High Saxon script to something older, something that looked like it belonged on a bone tablet buried beneath a forgotten temple. Draco stepped closer, his breath catching as he raised his wand. "Lumos," he murmured, but not to see. The light from his tip was soft blue-tinged, a spell he found in a restricted Malfoy grimoire, one that responded to ancestral wards. The moment the glow touched her skin, the runes flared. They brightened in sequence. One by one they caught the light, not reflecting it, but absorbing, then re-emitting it in pulses. Draco moved his wand in slow arcs, tracing unseen patterns in the air. Each motion caused the symbols to shift further, rearranging like stars aligning. Hermione watched, pulse quickening. She could feel it now, not pain, but pressure, as if the magic were threading through her veins, searching for something. "Do you feel that?" she asked, voice tight. Draco didn't answer. His jaw was clenched, eyes narrowed in concentration. He flicked his wand in a counterclockwise spiral, once, twice, then held it steady, tip pointed directly at the center of the cipher. The runes lit up all at once. A low hum filled the air, almost below hearing, vibrating in Hermione's molars. Her skin shimmered, the symbols forming a complete ring, then, like a lock turning, snapped into a fixed sequence. Draco exhaled sharply. That's not Latin," he said. "No," Hermione breathed. "It's Proto-Nordic, pre-Roman. I've seen fragments in the Black family archives. Only they were carved into standing stones." Draco stepped back, lowering his wand. The glow in her arm dimmed, but didn't vanish. The runes remained, now still, etched in faint gold against her skin like a map drawn in firelight. He pulled a scrap of parchment from his sleeve and tapped it with his wand. "Revelio Destination." The paper darkened, then bloomed with ink, 3 sets of numbers, precise and unyielding. Latitude, longitude, altitude. Hermione stared. "That's in the Carpathians." "You're the border of Romania and Ukraine, a monastery," Draco said softly. "Or what's left of one. The Order of the Veiled Spire. It was wiped out in the 13th century. Supposedly they guarded blood magic relics too dangerous to let survive." She turned her arm, watching the runes. "Why would it lead us there?" Draco didn't answer right away. He looked at her, really looked, and for a moment, the old walls between them seemed to waver. "Because it's not just leading us," he said. "It's responding to me, To my magic. That's not coincidence, Granger. That's design. She met his gaze. You think your family had something to do with this? I think, he said slowly, that my ancestors knew about the cipher long before it ever touched your skin. The wind picked up, tugging at their robes. Below, the black lake shimmered under starlight, still and deep. Hermione swallowed, the weight of the runes pressing into her like a promise or a warning. We leave at dawn, she said. Draco nodded. And this time, we go together. Rain lashed against the arched windows of the Hogwarts library, each drop sounding like a whispered secret against the glass. Hermione traced the glowing rune on her forearm with her index finger, the light pulsing faintly beneath her skin like a second pulse. It had changed again, subtle, but undeniable. The looping symbol now resembled a twisted helix wrapped around a crescent moon, and it burned with a warmth that only flared when Draco was near. He stood by the restricted section, his back straight, fingers pressed to the spine of a crumbling grimoire. It's not just reacting to me, he said, voice low. It's star-recognizing star-me. Hermione swallowed, the weight of his words settling in her chest. You mean it knows your bloodline? Draco turned, his gray eyes catching the candlelight. It's older than house rivalries, Granger. This magic, this star cipher star, it wasn't made for just anyone. It chose you, but it only star speaks star to me. A shiver ran down her spine. They'd spent weeks researching, chasing fragments through obscure texts, only to find dead ends buried beneath centuries of silence. Until now, the book in Draco's hands, Star Sanguis Memoria, Blood and the Echoes That Remain Star, had been sealed with a blood lock. He'd pricked his finger, whispered a name, Star Abraxas Star, and the wards had dissolved like mist. Inside, the pages spoke of ancestral memory magic, a forgotten art practiced by a sect of wizards who believed blood carried not just lineage, but memory, purpose, even destiny. The cipher, the text suggested, was a star, vinculum animi star, a bond of souls across time, activated when two bloodlines intertwined by ancient design came into proximity. And you think, our families? Hermione asked, not finishing the sentence. Draco's jaw tightened. My mother's side, black, through Lysandra Malfoy. She was rumored to have married outside the pure blood circles, secretly. The Malfoy elders erased it from the records, but there are hints, whispers in old wills, in land deeds from southern France. The Blacks weren't just obsessed with blood purity, they were hiding something. Hermione's breath caught. So the cipher isn't just star, on star me. It's star in star me, passed down. From star your star mother's side, Draco said, stepping closer. Muggle-born, yes, but that doesn't mean no magic. Just dormant, buried, until now. They both knew what that meant. The journey wouldn't end in Hogwarts. The cipher had already begun to shift when Draco was near, its rooms rearranging like a living map. Earlier that morning it had formed a sequence resembling coordinates, latitude and longitude, endpointing a location in the Carpathians. But there were other markers too, faint impressions beneath the skin, like scars from a language not yet spoken. Each time Draco touched her arm, reluctantly, carefully, the light surged, and a name surfaced in Hermione's mind. Star Kalinor, Star. A name that didn't exist in any modern text, but one that appeared in a fragment from a lost Illyrian scroll they'd found in the restricted section. We'll need to go, she said, voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. Not just to Romania, France first, then Austria, then deeper east. Draco studied her, the usual sarcasm absent, replaced by something quieter, something like concern. You're not just reading a spell, Hermione. It's star using star you, pulling memories from places your mind's never been. She looked down at her arm, the cipher pulsed, as if in agreement. And if it's my blood, she whispered, then maybe, I'm supposed to remember too. He didn't argue, didn't mock, just nodded, and for the first time reached for her hand. Not to activate the cipher, but because she looked afraid. Outside the storm broke. A sliver of moon emerged, pale and watchful, as if the night itself was holding its breath. They would leave at dawn. Rain fell in silver sheets across the crumbling spires of the abbey, its stones slick with moss and centuries of silence. Hermione pulled her cloak tighter, the fabric heavy with damp, her breath curling in pale wisps before her. Beside her, Draco stood motionless, his pale eyes scanning the arched entrance, its lintel carved with a spiral symbol that mirrored the one now pulsing faintly beneath Hermione's skin. "It's here," she whispered, her fingers brushing the warm rune on her forearm. It shimmered, just once, like a heartbeat beneath her touch. Draco didn't answer. He was listening. The wind howled through the broken windows, but beneath it, something else stirred. A murmur. Not in any language he knew, and yet he understood. Fragments of sentences, half-formed thoughts, layered over one another like voices trapped in glass. "Do you hear that?" he asked, voice low. Hermione nodded. "It's not just the wind, it's memories, or echoes." They stepped inside. The naive stretched before them, its vaulted ceiling half-collapsed, moonlight bleeding through the gaps, and painting fractured patterns on the floor. Stone saints watched from niches, their faces worn smooth by time, their eyes hollow. But it was the walls that drew them. The stones themselves seemed to breathe, soft sighs rising from the mortar, as if the abbey remembered every hand that had ever touched it. Draco reached out, his fingertips grazing a column. The moment he made contact, the whisper sharpened. "Star." She bore the mark too. The blood remembers Star. Star, he denied it. But the cipher chose him Star. Star bound before birth, bound by silence Star. Hermione gasped. "They're talking about us." "No," Draco said, pulling his hand back as if burned. "Not us, others, like us." They moved deeper, their boots crunching on shattered glass and fallen stone. The cipher on Hermione's arm grew warmer, its runes shifting, 2 new symbols spiraling into place, a crescent, moon, cradling a serpent, and a key forged from thorns. She traced them, frowning. "This isn't Latin, or Greek. I've never seen this script before." Draco knelt beside a broken altar, brushing dust from an inscription. "It's Old Saxon, mixed with something older, proto-magical maybe." Hermione stared at him. "You can read that?" He didn't look up. "My grandmother used it, said only blood could decipher it. I thought she was mad." The air thickened. The whispers multiplied, rising into a chorus. Pleading, warning, singing. A woman's voice cut through the noise, clear and close, as if standing just behind them. "Star, the cipher does not choose the worthy. It chooses the bound, Star." Hermione spun. No one was there. Draco stood slowly, his jaw tight. "We're not alone." A cold draught swept through the nave, extinguishing the small lantern. Hermione had lit. In the sudden dark, the runes on her arm flared, blue-white light spilling across the floor, illuminating the walls. And there, etched into the stone in glowing script, were names, dozens of them. Some faded, others stark and fresh. Hermione stepped forward, heart pounding. At the center of the list, 2 names stood out, her own and Draco's, written not in ink, but in something darker. "Blood." "No," she breathed. "That's not possible." "It's been written long before we were born," Draco said, voice hollow. "They knew we'd come." The ground trembled. From the depths of the abbey, beneath the cracked flagstones, a low hum began, a resonance that vibrated in their bones. The cipher on Hermione's arm twisted, the runes rearranging again, forming a single word this time, pulsing like a warning. "Star, remember." Star, and then, from the shadows of the apse, a figure emerged, not solid, not quite ghost, but something in between. A woman in tattered robes, her hair long and silver, her eyes 2 stars in the dark. She looked at Hermione, then at Draco, and smiled sadly. "You have come at last," she said, her voice, the echo of all the others. The last of the twin lines, the final key. Draco stepped in front of Hermione. "Who are you?" The woman's form flickered. "I was the first bound, and I have waited so long for the cipher to awaken again." Hermione's voice trembled. "What happens when it does?" The woman's smile faded. "One lives, one remains. That is the price, that is the bond." The runes on Hermione's arm burned. The air in the ruined abbey tasted of moss and old stone, damp seeping through the soles of Hermione's boots as she stepped over a fallen beam. Moonlight, fractured by the skeletal arches above, painted silver shards across the cracked flagstones. She paused, breath-catching, as the cipher on her forearm pulsed, a slow, rhythmic throb like a second heartbeat. The runes had shifted again since they'd entered, twisting into a configuration neither of them recognized. "It's warmer now," she murmured, pressing the heel of her head against the glowing script. Draco stood a few paces behind, his wand raised, eyes scanning the shadows between the crumbling pillars. "Of course it is. We're standing in the middle of a cursed ruin built by people who thought human sacrifice was good for the soil." "It wasn't that," she said, frowning. "They were guardians, protectors of a bloodline." The text said, "The texts were written by madmen with too much time and too many curses." He stepped closer, his voice dropping. "And this place doesn't feel like protection. It feels like waiting." Hermione exhaled, fingers brushing the cold edge of an ancient plinth. Something hummed beneath her touch, not a sound, but a vibration, like the memory of a song. Then faintly a voice. Her name, not spoken aloud, not even breathed, just there, in the stillness, layered beneath the wind that whispered through the broken walls. "Hermione." She froze. Draco turned sharply. "What? Did you hear that?" "Hear what?" "My name. Someone something said my name." He moved to her side in one swift step, his arm brushing hers. "You're tired. You've been tracing runes for 3 days without sleep." "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "It wasn't in my head. It was star. Here star. Sida. In the stone." The cipher flared, bright enough to cast shadows on Draco's face. He stared at it, jaw tightening. "It's reacting to the sight. But why your star name?" She didn't answer. The voice came again, softer this time, almost tender. "Hermione, daughter of Alara." Her breath hitched. "That's not possible." "What?" Waco's voice was sharp now, alert. "My mother's name was Rose Granger." "Maybe it's not your star mother," he said slowly. "Maybe it's another one, a name carried, a line." She looked down at the plinth. Her fingers traced a groove half hidden beneath centuries of lichen, a name carved in a script that predated modern runes. "Alara." The stone beneath the letters was warm. "This can't be real," she whispered. "My parents, ordinary, non-magical." "Blood isn't always born of blood," Draco said, quieter now. "You know that. Magic remembers. It finds its way back." Another pulse from the cipher. This time the voice was clearer, layered with sorrow and something like recognition. "Daughter, return." The veil thins. Hermione stepped back, heart pounding. "It thinks I'm someone else. It thinks you're star. Her star." Draco corrected, hand finding the small of her back. Not pushing, just there. A steady presence. "And it's calling you home." She turned to him, eyes wide. "This is insane. I'm not part of some ancient bloodline. I'm not—" "You're standing in a forgotten sanctuary," he interrupted, voice low but firm. "And the magic here knows your name. The cipher only responds to me because I'm a Malfoy. But its star speaks star. To star, you star. That means something, whether you like it or not." A cold wind stirred the ashes of an old fire pit, lifting them in a spiral that didn't scatter. Instead, the ash formed letters, flickering, fragile, before dissolving again. Star, Alara's blood, Alara's heir. Star. Hermione's hands trembled. Draco stepped in front of her, shielding her from the ruined center, his wand now glowing with a steady defensive light. "You don't have to understand it now," he said, not turning. "But don't pretend it's not happening. And don't think for a second I'll let whatever's in these stones take you without a fight." She stared at his back, straight, unyielding, and realized with a quiet shock that she believed him. The cipher dimmed, the air stilled, but the echo of her name lingered, like a promise or a warning, whispered across centuries. The air in the Abbey's undercroft tasted of damp stone and time, thick with the silence of centuries. Hermione pressed her palm flat against the cold wall, the cipher on her forearm pulsing faintly, like a heartbeat beneath her skin. It had led them here, through moss-choked corridors, past forgotten altars, and shattered stained glass, always tugging, always pulling, as if something deep in the bones of this place was calling back. Draco stood a few paces behind, his wand raised, the tip glowing a pale blue that cast long shadows across the carvings. His breath came slow, measured. He'd stopped flinching at every echo, every draft that stirred the dust. Now he watched Hermione with a quiet intensity, the kind that didn't belong to schoolboy, taunts or Slytherin pride. "It's stronger now," she murmured, not turning. "Like it knows we're close." Close to what? Draco's voice was low, almost reluctant. A dead end. Another riddle. "Or just more proof that someone didn't want this found." She glanced back at him then, her eyes wide in the dim light. "You still don't believe it's connected to my family?" "I believe," he said carefully, "that someone didn't want anyone's star finding this, and that someone went to great lengths to make sure of it." He stepped forward, brushing his fingers over the stone beside her hand. The carvings were faint, worn down by centuries of neglect. But beneath the grime, the pattern was unmistakable, a spiral of runes, nearly identical to the one that had first appeared on Hermione's arm, the night of the lunar eclipse. "It's not just similar," Draco said, voice tight. "It's the same script, the same structure, only older by centuries." Hermione traced the edge of the spiral with her fingertip. The cipher on her skin flared, warm and sudden, making her gasp. The runes on the wall shimmered, just for a second, as if responding. Draco stepped back sharply. "Did you see that?" "Yes." Her voice trembled. "It's not just reacting to me, it's star, recognizing star me." A long silence settled between them, broken only by the distant drip of water from the ceiling. Draco turned away, running a hand through his hair, his jaw clenched. "There's something I haven't told you," he said finally. Hermione turned fully now, arms crossed. "That's a first." He didn't smile. "When we were in the Malfoy archives, before the cipher appeared, I found a record, buried in a sealed ledger from the 1600s. It mentioned a family, Muggle-born, powerful, targeted during the Purge after the Statute of Secrecy. They were called the Star, Luminary Star. Supposedly they could channel magic through bloodline sigils, wards, healing, even resurrection, according to the more dramatic accounts. Hermione's breath caught, and they disappeared, wiped out. The record said the Ministry, well, the precursor to it, feared their magic was too unstable. Too infectious star. But the Malfoy notes, they suggested it wasn't the Ministry, it was a coalition, pure-blood families, including mine. She stared at him. "You're saying your ancestors helped destroy mine?" "I'm saying," he said, voice strained, "that the cipher didn't appear on you by accident. It's not random, it's a star-claimed star. Remnant, a remnant, then waiting." A cold draft swept through the chamber, making the torches flicker. The cipher on Hermione's arm pulsed again, stronger now, insistent. The runes on the wall began to glow faintly, tracing a path downward into a crack in the floor that hadn't been there a moment before. Draco stepped toward her. "Don't move, not yet." But the pull was too strong. Hermione took a step forward, then another. The stone beneath her foot shifted with a low groan, revealing a narrow staircase spiraling into darkness. "This is what it wants," she whispered. "It's not just showing us the past. It's taking us into it." Draco reached for her arm, not to stop her, but to steady her. His hand was warm, real, grounding. "Then we go together," he said. "But if this is a trap, a memory, a curse, whatever, promise me you won't try to face it alone." She looked at him, really looked, and saw not the boy who'd called her a mudblood, but the man who'd spent weeks deciphering ancient texts, who'd stood between her and a cursed ward in Prague, who'd quietly handed her a vial of dreamless sleep potion when the nightmares came. "I promise," she said, and together they stepped into the dark. The air in the hall of veiled portraits was thick with the scent of old dust and charcoal, like a library forgotten at the edge of time. Moonlight, fractured by stained glass high above, bled soft patterns across the cracked marble floor, deep indigo, blood red, the pale green of tarnished silver. Hermione stepped forward, her boots echoing too loudly in the hush, and the cipher on her forearm flared, faint but unmistakable. It pulsed like a slow heartbeat, runes flickering beneath her skin, in a language that twisted when she tried to read it. Draco followed close behind, his breath shallow. "It's stronger here," he murmured. "Can you feel it?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. The sensation was a pull, not in her chest, but deeper, as though the cipher were tied to something in her bones. Along the hall's shadowed walls, portraits hung shrouded in velvet drapes, their subjects unseen. But as she passed each one, a whisper stirred behind the fabric. Not words, not yet. Just the breath of someone waking. One by one, the drapes lifted themselves, as if tugged by invisible hands. The portraits emerged not as painted figures, but as living faces, their eyes sharp with recognition. And they were all looking at her. A woman with Hermione's sharp cheekbones and unruly chestnut hair stared from a gilded frame, her fingers pressed to the canvas as if trying to break through. "Ilara," she whispered. "You've come back." Hermione froze. "I'm not—" "She bears the mark," another voice cut in. An older man in midnight blue robes, his eyes silver, like Draco's. "The seal of the veil is upon her." "She doesn't know," said a younger girl, no older than 10, her face smeared with ink. "She doesn't remember the blood song." Draco stepped forward, hand on his wand. "Who are you? What is this place?" The portraits turned to him, and for a moment their expressions softened. "Malfoy," the old man said, almost gently. "Inner of the silent line. You should not be here, and yet—" "You are necessary. My family," Draco asked, voice tight. "You know the stories, the woman," Ilara replied. "The oaths sworn in silence, the magic sealed behind blood. Your ancestors were keepers. Ours were the bound." Hermione's breath caught. "This cipher, it's from your family?" Ilara nodded. "We were the Veil Weavers. We wove protection into the fabric of the world, but the magic demanded a price. A life tethered to the seal. When the last of us fell, the cipher sought new blood. It found yours." "That's impossible," Hermione whispered. I'm Muggle-born." A sad smile crossed Ilara's face. "Not by blood, by choice. Your mother was a Granger by marriage, yes. But your true name is Lysara." Silence. Draco looked at her, his gray eyes wide, searching. "Hermione," she stepped back, shaking her head. "No, that's not. I would know. My parents, they loved you," Ilara said softly. "They raised you in safety, unaware of what slept in your veins. The cipher only awakened when the veil began to tear. It has been waiting, for you." Hermione pressed her palm to her forehead, the cipher burning now, warm and insistent. Fragments of dreams flickered behind her eyes, stone towers under starless skies, a woman singing in a language with no name, a vow spoken in fire. "I don't remember," she said, voice breaking. "You will," the child whispered, "when the last portrait speaks." At the end of the hall, one frame remained covered. Draco reached for her hand without thinking. His fingers were cold, but the contact grounded her. Together, he said. She nodded, and they walked forward. The final drape lifted. Inside the portrait stood a man and a woman, their hands clasped, their faces solemn. Between them hovered a glowing sigil, the same shape as the cipher on Hermione's arm. And beneath them, carved into the frame, words in ancient script began to glow. "Star, one blood, one bond, one soul to carry the light. When the veil falls, the weaver must rise, or all is undone. Star." The fire in the hearth of the abandoned Malfoy safehouse in Wiltshire crackled low, casting long, trembling shadows across the stone walls. Rain tapped a steady rhythm against the narrow windows, muffled by ancient silencing charms that still hummed faintly in the air. Hermione sat on the edge of a moth-eaten chaise, her right sleeve pushed past the elbow, the flesh beneath glowing with soft, pulsing light. The cipher had spread, again, its intricate web of runes now coiling from her wrist to just below her shoulder, the symbols shifting like living ink. She held her breath, watching. Draco stood beside her, closer than he'd ever allowed himself to be outside of duels or detentions. His fingers hovered just above her skin, not touching. Yet the cipher responded, the runes flared brighter, twisting, rearranging. One symbol, sharp and angular like a serpent coiled around a dagger, pulsed insistently. Then another emerged beside it, smaller, entwined like a vine. A crescent moon pierced by a wand, its tip blooming into a star. Draco inhaled sharply. "I've seen that," he said, voice low, almost reverent. "Not together, never like that. But I know it." Hermione turned her arm slightly, her brow furrowed. "Which one?" He hesitated. "The first, the serpent and dagger. That's the Malfoy sigil. Not the official crest. Not the one on our goblets or the seals we use. This is older than the manor. I saw it once, carved into the base of my great-grandmother's mirror in the West Wing, before the Aurors took it during the trials." Hermione's breath caught. "Your family's magic is part of this." "I don't know." He ran a hand through his hair, the familiar gesture frayed with tension. "But blood magic doesn't just borrow symbols. It star-binds them. If that's Malfoy, and the other, if that's yours, it means the cipher isn't just star on star me," she finished. "It's star of star us. Both of us." A silence settled between them, thick with implication. The fire popped, sending a spark skittering across the hearth. Outside the wind rose, howling briefly before dying down again. Hermione flexed her fingers, watching the light ripple beneath her skin like water over stone. "It's not painful," she said, more to herself than to him. "Not exactly. It's like something trying to speak, a voice just below hearing." Draco looked at her, then really looked. Not with suspicion, not with the old sneer, but with something quieter. Concern, maybe, or the beginnings of understanding. When did it start? The spreading? Last night. In the library. I woke up with my arm burning. I thought it was a curse, something from the restricted section I'd triggered. But it wasn't pain. It was urgency. He crouched beside her, his gray eyes level with hers. "You didn't tell me. You were asleep," she said simply, "and I didn't want you to see it happen. Not like this. But it's star responds star to me. Yes," she exhaled, "and that terrifies me." Draco didn't flinch. "It terrifies me too." They sat like that for a long moment, the silence between them no longer heavy with old grudges, but charged with something fragile. Trust, perhaps, with a slow unraveling of everything they thought they knew. Then the cipher flared again, brighter this time, the two symbols pulsing in tandem, like heartbeats. And beneath the light, just for an instant, a third symbol flickered into view. A door, half open, framed by ivy and runes in a language neither of them recognized. Draco stood abruptly. "There's a vault," he said, "beneath the old estate in Normandy. My mother mentioned it once. Said it held things our ancestors didn't want the Ministry to find. Things older than the Inquisition." Hermione met his gaze. "Do you think it's connected?" "I think," he said, voice quiet, "that if this thing is made of our blood, then it's leading us somewhere only both of us can open." She nodded, rolling down her sleeve. The glow dimmed but didn't vanish. It was a part of her now, a part of star them star. "Then we go," she said, "together." The fire in the hearth of the abandoned Malfoy hunting lodge sputtered, casting long, trembling shadows across the stone walls. Draco stood by the window, his breath fogging the cold glass, watching the skeletal trees sway under a sickle moon. Behind him, Hermione sat cross-legged on a threadbare rug, her sleeve pushed up to reveal the cipher etched into the pale skin of her forearm. It pulsed faintly, the runes shifting like liquid silver, rearranging themselves in patterns. Neither of them could read. "It's reacting again," she murmured, lifting her arm toward the firelight. Draco turned, his jaw tight. "To what? To me? To you? I don't know." She traced one of the glowing symbols with her fingertip. "It's not painful, not anymore, but it feels aware." He took a step back. "That's exactly what I'm afraid of." Hermione looked up, frowning. "You've been pacing for an hour, Draco. Say it, whatever's eating at you." He exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. "What if this was meant to happen? What if someone my ancestors, some twisted branch of my family, created this spell centuries ago to bind someone to a Malfoy? Not protect, not guide, bind, like some cursed heirloom passed down through blood and madness." She stared at him. "That's a leap, is it?" His voice cracked. "You know what my family's capable of. We're not exactly known for benevolent magic. This cipher, It only responds to me. It flares when I touch it. It quiets when I'm near. What kind of coincidence is that?" Hermione pulled her sleeve down, her expression softening. "It could mean many things. Maybe it's drawn to your bloodline. Yes, but not to control you, or me. Maybe it needs both of us." "That's different." "Different? How?" He crossed the room in 3 strides, crouching in front of her. "You weren't there when we opened the vault beneath the old chapel. You didn't see the carvings. Malfoy sigils woven into spells about legacy, purity, eternal allegiance. There was a phrase, 'Star, the chosen vessel, shall answer only to the heir's voice.' Star." She met his gaze, unflinching. "I remember. But chosen vessel doesn't have to mean slave. It could mean guardian. Partner. Or," she hesitated, then whispered, "someone who balances the power." Draco looked away. "You always find a way to make darkness sound noble. And you always assume the worst of yourself," she said gently. "That's not noble either." A silence settled between them, broken only by the crackle of burning wood. Outside, the wind howled through the valley, rattling shutters. Draco stared at his hands, pale and trembling. "I don't want this, Hermione. I don't want to be the reason you're trapped in something you didn't choose." She reached out, her fingers brushing his wrist. The cipher beneath her sleeve flared, not with heat, but with light, a soft ripple that spread up her arm and dimmed as it neared him. He froze. "Did you feel that?" she asked. He nodded slowly. "Like recognition. Maybe it's not about ownership," she said. "Maybe it's about resonance, like 2 parts of a spell finally finding each other." "That sounds dangerously close to destiny," he muttered. "Maybe destiny isn't always a cage," she whispered. "Maybe sometimes it's just timing." Draco looked at her then, really looked. The firelight caught the gold in her eyes, the faint smudge of exhaustion beneath them. She was scared too, he realized. But she wasn't running. She was still here, still trying to understand, still trusting him, even when he didn't trust himself. He turned his hand, lacing his fingers with hers. The cipher glowed once, brightly, then settled into a slow, steady rhythm, like a heartbeat. "I don't know what this is becoming," he admitted, voice low. "But if it's binding someone, I need you to know. I'd never use it to hold you." Hermione squeezed his hand. "I know, and that's why I'm not afraid." Rain lashed against the shattered stained glass of the Abbey's west wing, each gust of wind howling like a spirit trapped between centuries. The storm had come on swift and sudden, swallowing the horizon in bruised purple clouds, cutting off their path back to the village. Now water seeped through the ancient ceiling, pooling on the cracked stone floor, reflecting the flickering light of the single oil lamp Draco had managed to coax alight. Hermione sat with her back against a crumbling pillar, arms wrapped around her knees, the cipher on her forearm pulsing faintly, silver glyphs swirling beneath her skin like ink in water. It had grown warmer since they entered the Abbey, more insistent, as if the storm stirred something dormant in the magic. Draco stood by the broken archway, watching the downpour with a scowl, of all the cursed places to be stranded. His voice was low, almost lost beneath the thunder. "We're alive," Hermione said, her tone quiet but firm. "And we're closer than we've ever been. The cipher led us here. There's a reason." He turned, his gray eyes catching the lamplight. "Or it's toying with you. This thing, it's not just some relic, Granger. It's star-alive star, in a way I don't understand. And it's using you." She looked down at her arm. "Maybe. But it chose me. And I was the only one who could touch it." He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "That's not coincidence. That's design." Silence stretched between them, filled only by the drumming rain and the occasional groan of ancient timber. Hermione shifted, wincing as a draft crept through her damp cloak. Draco noticed. Without a word, he pulled off his own and tossed it at her. She blinked. "You hate the cold. I hate you more if you die of pneumonia before we solve this," he muttered, turning away. A small, reluctant smile touched her lips. She draped the cloak over her shoulders. It still carried the faint scent of sandalwood and old parchment, unexpectedly human. After a while she said, "Do you ever wonder what your life would have been like if you hadn't been a Malfoy?" Draco stiffened. "Every day." The honesty startled her. He leaned against the opposite pillar, arms crossed. You think I don't see it? The weight of that name, like chains forged before I could speak. My father's pride, my mother's quiet disappointment, the way the world expects me to be a certain kind of monster. He paused. Sometimes I wonder if I ever had a choice. Hermione studied him, really studied him, not the boy who called her mudblood, not the smirking Slytherin, but the man standing in the ruins of a forgotten place, rain in his hair and sorrow in his voice. I used to think choice was everything, she said softly, that if I just worked hard enough, proved myself enough, I could outrun my blood, my birth, the way people looked at me. And now, she touched the cipher. Now I wonder if some things are written before we're born. If magic, real magic, doesn't care about choices, if it only cares about what's star and star us. Draco pushed off the pillar and walked closer, crouching in front of her. This thing is part of you now. I can see it. It's changing you. I know, then why keep going? She met his gaze. Because if I stop, it might win. And if it wins, it doesn't just claim me. It claims everything I've fought for. My identity, my freedom, my future. He looked away, jaw tight. And if the only way to break it is to lose you? The question hung, raw and unguarded. Hermione's breath caught. Draco didn't look at her when he spoke again. I didn't come this far to watch you disappear into some ancient spell written by dead men who thought they could control love, or fate, or whatever this is. A beat. Do you think that's what it is? She whispered. Love? He finally looked up. I think it's something older than hate, older than blood. And I think against every ounce of sense it brought us together for a reason. Outside the storm raged on, but in that broken abbey, beneath the weight of legacy and magic, something fragile and real began to bloom. The air in the vault was thick with the scent of aged parchment and cold stone, a silence so deep it seemed to swallow even the echo of their breath. Hermione's fingers trembled as she unrolled the brittle tapestry across the obsidian table, its threads shimmering faintly under the dim glow of Draco's wand. Dust swirled in a narrow beam of light, catching like tiny stars before settling once more. She hadn't expected it to be so large, nearly the length of the great hall, its edges frayed, its colors faded, but still pulsing with residual magic. This is impossible, she whispered, tracing a delicate golden thread with her fingertip. It's a bloodline map. Not just any bloodline. Look, these symbols match the ones in the cipher. Draco stepped closer, his shoulder brushing hers. The Malfoy sigil is here, he said, voice low. But so are others. Black, Lestrange, even the Prewits. And those names. I've never seen them before. He pointed to a cluster of ruins near the center, branching outward, like roots. They're interwoven, like marriages, alliances, or something older. Hermione's breath caught. The cipher on her forearm had begun to pulse, a slow, rhythmic throb that sent heat crawling up her arm. It's reacting, she said. Look. The runes along her skin shifted, twisting into shapes that mirrored the tapestry's central knot. One by one, the threads on the map brightened, until they reached a jagged tear near the lower left corner. There the fabric was missing, as though deliberately cut away. Around the gap, the surrounding threads appeared strained, frayed at the edges, as if resisting the void. That's not damage, Draco murmured, crouching to examine the break. This was severed, magically, with precision. He glanced at her. And your mark. It's strongest here. She swallowed. The warmth in her arm had become a steady pulse, almost painful now. Whatever's missing, it's connected to me. I can feel it. A cold draft curled through the chamber. Though there was no door, no window, the tapestry rippled, not from the wind, but from something beneath its surface. A slow, subcutaneous shimmer, like veins filling with light. Hermione stepped back, heart hammering. It's alive, she breathed. Draco caught her wrist, not roughly, but firmly, his eyes scanning the cipher. It's not just reacting to the map. It's responding to you, like it's searching. Suddenly a thread near the tear flickered, and an unfamiliar name surfaced. From the weave in elegant silver script, Star Granger Star. But not just that. Beneath it, a second name, half erased, yearly lost. Star Druella Star. Hermione froze. That's my mother's middle name, Draco said, voice tight. Ruella Rosier. But she never had children outside the family. There's no record. There doesn't need to be, Hermione interrupted, her voice barely above a whisper. Not if it was hidden. Buried. She looked down at the cipher, now blazing with light, its runes spinning faster, forming a symbol she'd seen only once before, in an old black family grimoire, a binding sigil, a vow written in blood. Draco's grip on her wrist loosened. I'm saying the Granger name might not be as Muggle-born as everyone believed, she said, eyes locked on the gap in the tapestry. And that missing piece, it's not just lost history, it's a lock. And we're standing in front of the key. Outside, thunder cracked across the Carpathian peaks, and the torches in the vault flared blue. The cipher burned hotter, searing her skin with a message she couldn't yet read. But Draco could feel it too, a pull deep in his chest, as if something old and sleeping had just begun to stir. The stone beneath Hermione's fingers was cold, but it wasn't the chill of centuries-old rock. It was something deeper, something watchful. The tapestry above them, frayed at the edges and stitched with silver thread long tarnished, had whispered when Draco touched it. Not in words, not exactly, but in a vibration low in the bones, like the hum of a tuning fork struck in another room. Now, standing shoulder to shoulder in the hidden alcove behind it, they both felt the weight of what lay beneath. Draco exhaled, his breath misting in air that shimmered unnaturally. It's not just a vault, he murmured. It's star-alive star. Hermione glanced at him, her brow furrowed. The cipher on her forearm pulsed in response, a slow, rhythmic glow like a heartbeat made of light. The runes had shifted again since they'd entered the passage, twisting into unfamiliar shapes that made her temples ache when she looked too long. They'd followed them here, step by reluctant step, from the restricted section to the forgotten east wing of Hogwarts, then through a series of spells hidden in old Malfoy correspondence that Draco had only half understood until now. He pressed his palm against the stone doorway, tracing a sequence of symbols only he could see, the Malfoy charm, passed down in whispered lessons from Lucius to son, meant to open ancestral doors. But this was different. This wasn't just blood. This was star oath star. The cipher on Hermione's skin flared. Draco stiffened. It knows you. I don't want star it to know me, she whispered. He didn't answer. Instead he spoke in low measured tones. Parseltum. But not quite. A dialect older, guttural, and resonant. The kind of magic that didn't ask permission. As the final syllable left his lips, the stone groaned. Cracks bloomed across the surface, glowing faintly gold, and the door split down the middle, peeling back like the petals of some ancient sleeping flower. Warm air rushed out. Not stale, not musty, but rich, humming with energy. It carried the scent of parchment, yes, but also crushed violets, and something metallic like lightning caught in a jar. Hermione stepped forward first, despite herself. Wait, Draco said, catching her wrist. His grip was firm, but not rough. We don't know what's in there, and we won't unless we look, she said, meeting his gaze. It led us here. Star. This star is why it chose you, why it won't let anyone else near it. He hesitated, then let go. Don't touch anything. The vault was smaller than she'd expected, a circular chamber lined with obsidian shelves, each holding objects wrapped in silk or sealed in glass. A single pedestal stood in the center, supporting a book bound in what looked like dragonhide, its clasp shaped like two serpents entwined. The cipher on her arm surged, warm now, almost painful. Draco moved to the left wall, where a series of vials floated in midair, suspended in chains of silver. These aren't potions, he said. They're memories, blood-bound. Hermione approached the pedestal. The book didn't open when she reached for it, but the cipher did. The runes peeled away from her skin, just for a moment, and pressed against the clasp like a key. With a soft click, the book sprang open. A sigh seemed to fill the room, not wind, not breathe, but something older. Words rose from the pages in shimmering script, forming in the air above them, Latin, but twisted with symbols, neither of them recognized. Draco stepped beside her, shoulder brushing hers. It's a covenant, he said slowly. A bond, not just between families, between star souls star. Hermione's breath caught. Hermione's breath caught. What kind of bond? He didn't answer right away. His eyes flickered to her, then back to the words. One that predates the Malfoys, the Grangers, even Hogwarts. It speaks of a choice, a sacrifice. One life to awaken the other, or both, bound together to keep the balance. The air grew heavier. The cipher sank back into her skin, dimming but not vanishing, and for the first time Hermione wondered if it had never been a curse. Perhaps it had always been a call. The air inside the vault was thick with the scent of cold stone and old magic, a whisper of ozone clinging to every breath. Torchlight flickered against obsidian walls, casting long, trembling shadows that danced like wraiths across the floor. At the chamber's heart, a circular dais rose from the ground, its surface carved with interlocking runes that pulsed faintly, soft, rhythmic pulses of silver light, like a sleeping pulse. Scattered across the dais were 6 crystal spheres, each the size of a human heart, suspended in midair without support, rotating slowly. Their interiors swirled with ghostly luminescence, shifting colors like trapped auroras. Hermione stepped forward, her breath catching. The cipher on her forearm, etched in glowing runes that had burned and shifted for weeks, flared suddenly, casting a pale blue light across the room. The spheres responded in kind, their inner light intensifying, humming with a sound just beneath hearing, like wind through forgotten corridors. Roland's bones, Draco murmured, staying close behind her. His wand was drawn, but his voice lacked its usual edge. They're not just storing memories, they're alive. She reached out, fingers trembling, and touched the nearest sphere. The moment her skin made contact, the crystal flared, bright, blinding, and a figure stepped out of the light, not a ghost, not a portrait, something more. A woman stood before them, tall and severe, her dark hair bound in intricate braids threaded with silver. She wore a robe of deep indigo, its hem embroidered with the same shifting runes that now lived beneath Hermione's skin. Beside her, a man, pale of face, sharp of feature, his eyes the same steely gray as Draco's, clutched a wand carved from blackthorn. They look like, Hermione began. Like my great-grandfather, Draco finished, voice low. Cassius Malfoy. I've seen his portrait in the family crypt. And that woman, Hermione whispered. She's a Blackthorn, the name's in my research. Rowena Blackthorn, founder of the Arcane Concord. She vanished in the 12th century. The figures moved as if unaware of their audience. Rowena spoke, her voice echoing as though from a great distance. We bind it not in ink, but in blood, not in stone, but in soul. Cassius raised his wand, and with a gesture both solemn and terrible, drew a spiral in the air. Rowena mirrored him, their motions in perfect counterpoint. Where their magic met, the cipher formed, glowing, writhing, a 3-dimensional script of light that spun between them like a living thing. Hermione gasped. The same symbols now burned on her arm flared in answer, searing with sudden heat. She staggered back, but Draco caught her elbow, steadying her. You're part of it, he said, not unkindly. It recognizes you. On the dais, the memory continued. Rowena pressed a hand to her chest, then to Cassius's. The bond must be mutual, willing. One cannot bear it alone. And if broken? Cassius asked. Then the bearer's mind will unravel. The magic will consume her. The words hung in the air like a sentence. Hermione looked down at her arm. The cipher pulsed steadily, almost in time with her heartbeat. They created it together, a shared enchantment. But something went wrong. Draco watched the fading image, his face unreadable. Or someone broke the pact. The sphere dimmed, the figures dissolving back into the crystal. Silence returned, heavier than before. Hermione turned to the next sphere. There's more. Granger, Draco said, catching her wrist gently. What if we're not supposed to see this? She met his gaze. What if we're the only ones who can? He didn't let go, not right away. And when she touched the second crystal, he stood beside her, shoulder to shoulder, as the past unfolded once more. The air in the crypt beneath the Malfoy estate tasted of damp stone and centuries. Dust hung like gossamer veils between the columns, catching the faint shimmer of the cipher etched across Hermione's forearm. It pulsed now, not with menace, but with a quiet rhythm, like a heartbeat beneath skin. Draco stood close, his breath unsteady, his wand lowered. Around them, The residual magic of the memory charm still rippled, leaving ghostly after-images of figures long gone. "She wasn't trying to bind us," Hermione whispered, her voice raw. "She was trying to save someone like me." They had found the truth in the last memory, a woman in flowing gray robes, her dark hair threaded with silver, standing at the edge of a moonlit glade. Her hands had traced the same runes now glowing on Hermione's skin, but her lips had not spoken a binding. She had whispered a plea, a protection, a legacy. "That was Rowena Ravenclaw," Draco said, the name slipping out before he could stop it. He had read the histories, dismissed them as myth. But the crest on the woman's cloak, the diadem, the raven, was unmistakable. Hermione turned to him, her eyes wide with wonder. Not just Rowena, her daughter, the one history forgot. The memory had shown it all. A child born with magic so vast it threatened to consume her. A mother who had watched as healers failed, as spells backfired, as the girl's own power turned against her. In desperation, Rowena had turned to blood magic. Ancient, forbidden. Not to control, but to shield. She had woven a cipher into her daughter's bloodline, dormant, until it found its true heir. A witch whose mind could channel raw magic without breaking. "And Malfoy's?" Draco asked, his voice tight. The memory flickered again. A young man, pale, sharp-featured, airing the same cold pride Draco knew too well, kneeling beside the Ravenclaw descendant. He had offered his blood, his name, not out of duty, but devotion. The cipher required a guardian, not a master. A partner. One whose soul could resonate with the magic, temper it, keep it from spiraling out of control. "The Malfoys were chosen," Hermione said softly, "because your ancestor loved her." Draco flinched. Love. Not alliance. Not power. Not blood purity. Love. "That's why it only responds to you," she continued, lifting her arm. The rooms shifted, swirling into new patterns, as Draco's fingers hovered just above them. "You're not activating it. You're calming it." He looked at her, really looked. The circles under her eyes, the faint tremor in her hands, signs he had mistaken for resistance, for strain. But now he saw the truth. The cipher wasn't draining her. It was awakening something buried deep, and without the counterbalance, the Malfoy bloodline. It could burn her from the inside out. "I thought it was a curse," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "Something dark, something my family would have used." Hermione shook her head. "It's the opposite. It's a safeguard. The way to protect witches like me, like her, from being destroyed by their own gifts." Silence settled between them, thick with the weight of what they had uncovered. The hatred, the years of rivalry, the sneers and hexes, none of it had ever mattered in the way they thought. They weren't pawns in some ancient game. They were heirs to a promise. Draco stepped forward, closing the distance. "Then we finish it, not to break the cipher, to awaken it properly." She searched his face. "You're sure? Once we do, there's no going back. It'll bind us." "Not by force," he interrupted. "By choice." A small smile touched her lips. "You've changed, Malfoy. And you," he said, "have always been more than they knew." Outside, the wind howled through the ancient oaks, but below, in the heart of the crypt, the cipher glowed steadily, no longer a riddle, but a vow, and for the first time, Hermione didn't fear its warmth. She welcomed it. As she reached for Draco's hand, the runes flared once, bright, golden, alive, and then settled, like a heartbeat finding its match. Rain lashed the stone walls of the Malfoy crypt, like whispered warnings, each drop echoing through the narrow passage where Hermione pressed her back against the cold, moss-slicked wall. Her breath came in short, visible puffs, the cipher on her forearm, pulsing with a dull, rhythmic light. Amber, one moment, deep violet the next, as though reacting to something beneath the earth. The air tasted of iron and old magic, thick enough to choke on. Draco crouched beside her, wand raised, his face half-shadowed by the faint lumos that trembled at the tip. "It's not supposed to do that," he murmured, eyes fixed on the shifting runes. "My grandfather's journal said the cipher would respond star to bloodline magic, not star pulse star, like a heartbeat." "It's not just responding," Hermione whispered. "It's learning. I can feel it, like threads pulling through my veins." She clenched her fist, the glowing symbols flaring as pain lanced up her arm. A low hum filled the corridor, rising from the ancient flagstones beneath them. A breath of wind, wrong, too cold, too deliberate, swept down the passage. The lumos flickered. Shadows pooled unnaturally at the far end, coiling like smoke before solidifying into the shape of a man. Tall, draped in tattered robes, the color of dried blood. His face was half-rotted, yet still bore the sharp Malfoy features, refined and cruel. His eyes glowed faintly, not with light, but with absence, black pits that drank the air around them. Draco went rigid, Lucius the First. The figure tilted its head. "Blood of my blood," it rasped, voice layered with echoes. "You bring a mud." "Say it," Draco snapped, stepping in front of Hermione, "and I'll banish you to the void myself." His wand trembled, but his voice did not. "I am not your enemy, boy," the spectre hissed. "I am your past, and she's an infection, a flaw in the bloodline's purity." "The cipher was never meant for her star," Hermione pushed forward. Hermione put forward. "It chose me. That means something. It was star stolen star, the ancestor. The ancestor spat, buried beneath the old rites. The cipher binds soul to blood, magic to legacy. It cannot serve two masters. One must yield. One must be star-consumed star." A wave of force knocked Hermione backward. She hit the wall with a gasp, the cipher blazing now, searing her skin. Her vision swam. The runes writhed, rewriting themselves in real time. Latin, then older symbols, then a language she'd only seen in fragments of forgotten grimoires. She understood none of it, yet her body did. Her magic rose in response, raw and unbidden. Draco turned, eyes wide. "Hermione." Your eyes, she could feel it. The cipher pulling, not just at her magic, but at her star. Self-star, her memories, her breath. It was tearing something loose. And the shadow Lucius was feeding on it, growing stronger, more solid. "No," Draco growled. He slashed his wand in a sharp arc. "Star expulso sanguis." Star, the spell, one from the family's forbidden rites, struck the spectre like a whip of silver fire. The ancestor shrieked, the sound reverberating through the crypt like cracking stone, but it didn't vanish. Its star laughed star. "You defy your blood, Draco. You protect the intruder. Then you will fall with her." The ground split. Roots of blackened magic erupted, coiling like serpents toward them. Draco grabbed Hermione's hand, warm, trembling, and yanked her aside, just as a tendril slammed into the wall where she'd been. "Stay close," he panted, "and whatever happens, don't let go." She nodded, her fingers tightening around his. The cipher flared between them, and for the first time, Draco's skin shimmered faintly where they touched, as though the magic recognized him too, not as master, but as star pair star. The ancestor screamed again, but this time it was fear. The cipher pulsed once, then blazed with a light so pure it turned shadow to ash. And in that moment, Hermione understood it wasn't about blood, it was about balance. About two lines, once torn apart, now meeting again. The crypt fell silent, dust drifted in the still air. Draco exhaled, shaky. "Did we kill it?" Hermione looked down. The cipher had dimmed, but the runes had changed, now forming a single word, ancient and clear. Star, remember, star. The air in the hidden chamber beneath the Venetian palazzo tasted of salt and ancient stone, thick with the memory of tides long receded. Hermione stood at the edge of a crumbling marble staircase that plunged into black water, her breath shallow, her fingers pressed against the cipher now pulsing faintly beneath her left collarbone. The rooms had shifted again 3 nights prior, twisting, flaring gold for a single breath before settling into a new configuration that Draco had painstakingly translated from a water-stained scroll in the Malfoy archives. "It's not just a map," he'd said, voice low. Eyes narrowed in the candlelight. "It's a sequence. Each location is a trial. And this one's guarded by something old. Older than the Ministry. Older than Hogwarts." Now, standing at the threshold, Hermione could feel the weight of that age in the silence. No birds, no wind, not even the distant hum of a gondolier's song from the canals above. The ruin was sealed, buried beneath layers of silt and forgotten enchantments, hidden even from muggles, who walked unaware over the shifting foundations of Venice. Draco stepped beside her, adjusting the strap of the enchanted satchel slung across his chest. Inside, vials of gillyweed, a charmed diving mask from his mother's collection, and a sliver of moonstone pulsed with restrained energy. "You're certain this is the only way in?" Hermione asked, her voice echoing slightly off the damp walls. He didn't answer right away, his gaze fixed on the dark water. "The Cipher reacted when we crossed the Rialto Bridge, and it flared when I spoke the name Star Aether Star. You felt it, didn't you?" She nodded. The rune for Star Aether Star had burned beneath her skin, a sudden heat that made her gasp. It was becoming harder to ignore the way the Cipher responded to Draco, not just his touch, but his voice, his presence, as if it recognized him on some primal level. "I don't like this," she admitted. "Water magic this deep, it's rarely benevolent." "No," he agreed, "it isn't. But we're not turning back. Not when it's Star, you Star. It's speaking through." She turned to him, surprised by the raw certainty in his tone. There was no sneer, no hesitation, only a quiet resolve that unsettled her more than any curse. They stripped off their outer robes, revealing the fitted, water-resistant garments Hermione had conjured from her beaded bag, charmed with warming spells and reinforced with threads of mersic. Draco handed her the diving mask, its lenses etched with runes for clarity and depth perception. "Don't lose it," he said, half joking, but his eyes were serious. "I won't," she replied, fastening it carefully. They each took a strand of gillyweed, its rubbery texture familiar from past duress. The transformation was always jarring, the gills splitting open along her neck, the strange pull at her legs as her body adapted. Draco grimaced as his own gills formed, fingers brushing the tender skin before clenching his jaw. "Ready?" he asked. She wasn't, but she nodded anyway. They stepped into the water together. Cold seized her, sharp as a blade, then faded as the magic took hold. Below, the ruins unfolded like the bones of a drowned god, arched colonnades swallowed by kelp, statues with coral for hair, their faces eroded into silence. Schools of silverfish darted through shattered domes, and in the distance a faint blue light pulsed, steady, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. The Cipher flared again, hotter now, pulling her forward. They swam in silence, wary of the stillness. Then, movement. Shadows coiled beneath the broken pillars. Not fish, not eels. Something with too many limbs, with eyes like polished obsidian. Draco reached for her hand, fingers tightening. "Star, don't stop, Star." His lips formed, and she didn't. The water began to hum, a low thrum that vibrated in her bones. The light ahead grew brighter, revealing a stone dais cradling a single object, a silver key, suspended in a sphere of swirling currents, as if held by invisible hands. But between them and the key, the shadows rose. A chorus of whispers filled the water, not in any language she knew, yet she Star understood. "Star, prove your bond. One breath, for two souls. One heart to open the door." "Star." Hermione turned to Draco. His gray eyes met hers, wide with the same dawning horror. The trial wasn't about survival. It was about sacrifice. The water closed over Hermione's head like a shroud, cold and absolute. One moment she was stepping across the sunken threshold of the Atlantean ruin. The next, the sea roared in, sealing the ancient chamber behind a shimmering barrier of enchanted currents. Draco's shout was muffled, distorted, his hand reaching for hers just as the wards awoke. She sank, limbs heavy, her robes billowing around her like dark seaweed. The Cipher on her forearm pulsed beneath the skin, its ruse glowing a soft, urgent blue. It was reacting, drawing power from something deep in the ruins. Around her the water stilled, not with silence, but with memory. Images bloomed in the liquid dark. A woman with Hermione's eyes standing at the edge of a cliff, clutching a silver locket. A man in archaic robes inscribing the same cipher onto a stone tablet, his hands trembling with exhaustion. Fire. So much fire, engulfing a library, books screaming as they burned. Hermione gasped, water flooding her mouth. She choked, kicking upward, but there was no surface. The ruin had become a tomb, and the memories were not merely visions. They were pulling her under, rewiring her thoughts. She saw herself as a child, small and lost, whispering spells under her breath in the dark. It wasn't her memory. It was someone else's, someone older, someone whose blood ran in her veins. A hand seized her wrist. Draco. His silver blonde hair fanned in the current, his face pale but determined. He pressed a small rune-etched pendant to her chest. Salazar's breath. She recognized it from the Malfoy vault archives, and whispered a countercharm. The water around them cleared slightly, the vision shuddering like ripples disturbed. "You're not her," he said, voice distorted but firm. "This isn't your past. It's the Ciphers." Hermione shook her head, trying to surface from the flood of foreign emotion. "It feels like mine, like I lived it. Exactly what the wards want you to believe." He gripped her shoulders, forcing her to look at him. "The cipher is tied to the bloodline, but it's using your mind to access the memories. Don't let it." She blinked, focusing on the pressure of his hands, the realness of him. The runes on her arm flared, then dimmed. "How do we break it? Together." He held up his own forearm. On his pale skin, faint impressions of the same cipher had begun to form, ghostly, incomplete but unmistakable, and responded to me back in the antechamber. I think it recognizes us both." Hermione's breath caught. The implication spun through her. Malfoy blood intertwined with whatever ancient line she descended from. But there was no time. The ruins groaned. Cracks spiderweb through the coral-encrusted pillars. The wards were collapsing, and with them the fragile balance holding back the sea's crushing weight. "We need to find the keystone," she said, voice steady. "The inscription, the one that matches the cipher's first form. It has to be here." Draco nodded, releasing her, but staying close. They swam through crumbling corridors, the water thick with silt and forgotten magic. The visions returned in flashes, whispers in a language neither understood. A woman weeping over a cradle, a vow sworn in blood. But this time Hermione resisted. She anchored herself in Draco's presence, in the way he glanced back at her, checking, guiding. Then she saw it, a stone plinth embedded with a crystalline sigil, pulsing in time with her heartbeat. The original rune, the source. She reached for it. The moment her fingers brushed the crystal, the entire ruin shuddered. The cipher on her arm burned, shearing through muscle and bone. She screamed underwater, the sound swallowed by the dark. Draco lunged, not away, but toward her. He placed his palm over hers on the crystal, and spoke a single word in Parseltongue, one she didn't know he could utter. The ruse shattered. Light erupted, white, blinding, then collapsed inward. The water receded in a violent surge, expelled by a collapsing ward. They were flung backward, tumbling through the dark, until finally, blessedly, they broke the surface. Gasping, Hermione clung to a half-submerged column. Above, moonlight pierced the sea. Draco floated beside her, breathing hard, his eyes wide with something she couldn't name. The cipher on her arm had changed. The runes had rearranged, now forming a single, unmistakable symbol. A serpent, coiled around a rose. And beneath it, faint but clear, two names, etched not in ink, but in light. Hers and his. Rain lashed against the ancient windows of the Black family library, each drop tapping like a whispered secret against the glass. Hermione sat hunched over a crumbling tome bound in silver-threaded leather, her fingers tracing the margin notes in shaky script. The cipher on her forearm pulsed faintly, a soft blue thrum beneath her skin, reacting not to the book, not to her whispered incantations, but to the quiet presence across the room. Draco leaned against the mantel, one hand absently brushing soot from the cracked marble. He hadn't spoken in nearly an hour. His eyes, pale and guarded, flicked toward her every few minutes, then away just as quickly. It was maddening. "This," she said suddenly, voice sharp enough to crack the silence. "This connection. It's not just the cipher, is it?" He didn't answer, just turned his head to stare at the dead hearth, as if the ashes held a better conversation. Hermione closed the book with a thud. "Every time I cast near you, my magic ends. Like it knows you, like its star wants star to reach you." She flexed her fingers, remembering the warmth that surged through her wand last night, when Draco had stood too close, murmuring a countercharm over her shoulder. The spell had worked too well, unfolding with a grace that wasn't hers alone. I've read about magical residents, soul ties, blood oaths, but nothing explains this, not Foy. Draco exhaled, slow and controlled. Maybe you're overthinking it. Overthinking? She stood, the chair scraping against the stone. I'm not imagining this. Draco. When you touched the cipher in Prague, it lit up like a beacon. When I tried the summoning charm in Vienna, it failed. Until you whispered the incantation star behind star me. Then it worked perfectly. That's not coincidence. He turned then, eyes narrowed. And what do you want me to say, Granger? That I know why your spells curl toward me like ivy? That I understand why your magic star tastes star-like home when it brushes mine? She froze. Tastes. He looked away, jaw tight. Figure of speech. It didn't sound like one. Silence stretched between them, thick with the weight of things unsaid. The cipher on her arm flared, a brief spiral of silver light, and Draco's breath hitched. His fingers twitched at his side, as if resisting the urge to reach for her. Hermione took a step forward. You do know something. I know enough to know we shouldn't be digging deeper, he said, voice low. Some doors, once opened, can't be closed, and some truths. He paused, his gaze finding hers. Don't belong to us. They belong to people long dead. People who made promises they shouldn't have. That's not an answer. Maybe it's the only one I'm allowed to give. She studied him. The tension in his shoulders, the faint tremor in his hands, the way he wouldn't quite meet her eyes. This wasn't arrogance. This wasn't Malfoy deflecting with a sneer. This was fear. Is it dangerous? She asked softly. For me? Draco's expression flickered. Pain, regret, something darker. It's not the spell that worries me. It's what it means. When its star requires star, then tell me what it requires. He laughed, but it was hollow. You think I don't want to. Every time I look at you I see it. The way the rooms shift when you're near. The way your pulse quickens when my magic brushes yours. It's not natural. It's star-designed star. And I. He broke off, fists clenching. I don't know how to protect you from something written in blood before either of us drew breath. Hermione's throat tightened. You don't have to protect me. I just need the truth. The truth might be the one thing I can't give. The cipher flared again, brighter this time, and a jolt of warmth shot up her arm, straight to her chest. Her breath caught. For a heartbeat, she felt it, not just the magic, but something deeper. A pull, ancient and relentless, like a thread woven through time, tying her to the boy standing in shadow. Then in that moment she wondered if the real danger wasn't the cipher at all, but the part of her that didn't want to let go. The first cold touch of dawn slipped through the dormer window, painting the stone walls of Hermione's room in pale silver. She awoke with a shiver, the weight of sleep still clinging to her limbs, but something beneath her skin was restless. A faint warmth pulsed along her left shoulder, insistent and alive. She sat up slowly, pushing the heavy blanket aside, and twisted to look over her shoulder in the dim light. The mirror across the room caught the reflection, a shimmer, like oil on water, shifting across her skin. She held her breath. The cipher had changed. Where once it had been a tangle of foreign runes spiraling from her collarbone to her shoulder blade, it now pulsed with deeper definition. The symbols had grown bolder, no longer drifting aimlessly, but aligning into something deliberate. The pattern arced upward like a crest, branching into 3 interwoven knots at the top. Ancient, regal, unmistakable. Hermione reached back with trembling fingers, tracing the outline. The moment she touched it, the runes flared, golden light threading through them like veins of molten metal. It wasn't just magic, it was a name. She knew it, though she had never heard it. Star Viridian. Star. The words surfaced in her mind like a memory dredged from a deep dark well. Her breath hitched. She had spent days scouring the restricted section, tracing every mention of cipher magic, blood-bound enchantments, even the obscure lore of the old continental families. But Viridian, she'd never seen it in any text. No mention in Star Moste Potentia Potions. Star, no reference in Star, the lineages of noble wizard in house. Star. It was as if the name had been erased. A knock at the door made her flinch. Granger, you're awake, aren't you? Draco's voice, low and edged with impatience. cut through the silence. He didn't wait for an answer. The door creaked open, and he stepped inside, his school robes askew, hair still damp from the showers. His gray eyes flicked to her reflection in the mirror, and froze. "What in Merlin's name?" He crossed the room in 3 strides, stopping just behind her. "It's changed." "Yes," she whispered. "And I think it's showing me who I really am." He didn't touch her at first. Draco Malfoy had never been one for gentleness, but when he finally reached out, his fingers hovering just above the crest on her skin, his breath stilled. The moment his shadow passed over the runes, they lit again, not in response to her, but to him. A pulse, deep and resonant, like a heartbeat shared between 2 people standing too close. Draco pulled back as if burned. "That shouldn't happen," he murmured. "Only blood should trigger it. Or what?" He looked away, jaw tightening. "Or a bond, one written in magic older than Hogwarts." Hermione turned to face him fully. "What aren't you telling me, Draco?" His eyes met hers then, not with the usual sneer, but with something raw fear, perhaps, or recognition. The Viridian line. They weren't just powerful. They were forbidden, banished from Britain centuries ago for practicing blood-sight magic, binding souls, forging ciphers like this one, not as curses, but as vows, lifetimes bound by a single mark. She felt the weight of it settle in her chest. "And you know this how?" He didn't answer at once. Instead, he rolled up the sleeve of his left forearm. There, just above his wrist, nearly faded with time, was a scar, not random, but shaped like a broken spiral. Hermione reached for it without thinking, her fingers brushing the old wound. Draco flinched, but didn't pull away. "That's not a scar," she whispered. "It's a cipher, a dormant one." He looked down at it, voice barely audible. "My great-grandmother was a Viridian. They erased her from the family records, called her a traitor. But the blood, it never disappears." The air between them thickened, charged with something deeper than magic. The runes on Hermione's shoulder glowed once more, not in warning, but in answer. And for the first time she wondered if she hadn't been chosen. Perhaps she had come home. The Channel wind bit through Hermione's coat as the train pulled into King's Cross, its iron breath laced with the damp chill of an English autumn. Across from her, Draco sat with his eyes closed, one hand resting near the hilt of the obsidian dagger they'd taken from the vault beneath Prague. The cipher on Hermione's forearm pulsed faintly, a slow, rhythmic throb, like a second heartbeat. Darker now, the runes twisted into shapes she didn't recognize. They hadn't spoken much since leaving the catacombs. Too much had shifted in the silence between them. She watched the countryside blur past, golden stubble fields, skeletal trees, the occasional flash of a red fox dashing across fallow land. It all felt too ordinary, too safe, as if the world hadn't changed while they'd been gone, tracing blood oaths in forgotten chapels and whispering incantations older than Hogwarts itself. But the cipher knew. It had grown heavier with every step closer to Scotland, as though the castle itself were calling it home. Her fingers brushed the parchment McGonagall had sent, an official scroll sealed with the Hogwarts crest, delivered by a wind-ruffled barn owl with Darn. "Star, return at once. The wards have been breached. Something is stirring in the lower corridors." Star, no explanation, no reassurance. Just urgency pressed into the ink. Draco opened his eyes. "She doesn't know what we found," he said quietly. "Not really. She knows enough," Hermione replied. "McGonagall's never been one for underestimating danger." A wry smile touched his lips. "No, but she's also never had to deal with ancient binding magic seeping through the foundations of her school." The cipher flared warm against her skin. A rune flickered, Star Malfoy Star, then dissolved into spirals that looked almost like tears. He saw it. His breath caught just slightly. "It's reacting to proximity. To the castle." Mani pulled her sleeve down. "It's been doing that since Dover. I think it's not just tied to bloodlines. I think it's tied to Star Place Star, /Star. Hogwarts is part of the spell's origin, or its anchor." Draco leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Then why now? Why after all this time?" "Because we woke it," she said simply. "The vault in Prague, it wasn't just a repository. It was a lock, and we picked it." he exhaled sharply. Brilliant, Granger. Nothing like breaking ancient seals before breakfast. She almost smiled. Almost. But the weight in her chest wouldn't let her. When the train hissed to a stop, they stepped onto the platform beneath a bruised sky. Rain hovered, thick in the air. Hagrid was waiting near the barrier, his greatcoat steaming slightly, his eyes sharp beneath the brim of his moleskin hat. "Yeah, look tired," he rumbled, falling into step beside them. "And Malfoy, you got that look. Like a man who's seen a ghost, and knows it's got paperwork." Draco snorted. "Accurate." They apparated to the edge of the forbidden forest, the familiar crack of magic sending a shiver through Hermione's bones. The castle loomed ahead, its towers clawing at the clouds, but something was wrong. The air tasted metallic like old coins or blood. The torches along the outer walls flickered green at the edges, their flames curling inward as if repelled by invisible hands. At the oak doors McGonagall stood waiting, her face carved from stone and shadow. "You're late," she said. "We came as quickly as we could," Hermione said. "What's happened?" McGonagall's gaze dropped to Hermione's covered arm. "The Chamber of Secrets has opened." Draco went still. "That's impossible. It was sealed after, not by a basilisk," McGonagall interrupted. "By something older. The runes along the corridor, they're the same as the ones on your skin, Miss Granger, and they're changing, responding." Hermione's breath caught. She pulled back her sleeve. The cipher was no longer pulsing. It was star-crawling SAR, shifting, writhing like ink in water, forming words in a language neither of them could speak. But that Draco somehow felt star in his blood. Star Malfoy, Granger, return, breathe, bind, star. He stepped forward, hand outstretched, not to comfort but to answer. As his fingers neared her arm, the runes stilled. One word glowed, then faded. Star, together, star. The air in the Chamber of Secrets tasted of damp stone and ancient magic, thick enough to choke on. Hermione's breath came in short, sharp gasps as she stepped forward, her palm pressed flat against the serpent-carved wall. The cipher on her forearm pulsed in time with the slow, rhythmic thrum beneath her feet, a heartbeat buried deep in Hogwarts bones. It wasn't the same now, not since they'd entered. The runes had shifted, coiled tighter, glowing a sickly green that made shadows writhe like living things. "It's reacting to you," Draco said, voice low, his wand raised but uncertain. His gray eyes flicked from the ceiling to the slick stone floor, where faint cracks spiderwebbed outward from Hermione's boots. "Not just glowing, it's awake." She swallowed. "I can feel it. Like something's pulling at my ribs. Like it knows me." A low groan echoed through the chamber, stone grinding on stone. From the mouth of the great stone serpent at the far end, a dout of emerald flame burst forth, licking the high ceiling before vanishing. The cipher flared. Hermione cried out, doubling over as pain lanced up her arm. "Granger!" Draco lunged forward, catching her before she fell. The moment his fingers brushed her bare wrist, the cipher dimmed, just slightly, and the chamber exhaled. Draco froze, staring at the place where their skin met. It stopped. Hermione looked up at him, her face pale, eyes wide with something beyond pain, recognition. "Do it again." He hesitated, then slid his hand down to cover the glowing mark completely. The green light softened to a dull throb, like a candle behind frosted glass. Around them, the air stilled. The cracks in the floor ceased spreading. "This makes no sense," he muttered. "Why you? Why me? Blood," she whispered, pushing herself upright. "The cipher isn't just magic. It's tied to bloodlines. Salazar's blood. But not just his." She looked at him. "Yours." Draco recoiled. "My family's never what? Connected to this place." Hermione stepped closer, her voice gaining strength. "The Malfoys trace back to the old pure-blood circles. Draco, to alliances no one talks about. This isn't Parseltongue on my skin. It's older than Hogwarts, and it responded to your touch." She reached for his hand. "Let me see your arm." He pulled back instinctively, then exhaled sharply and rolled up his sleeve. Nothing. No mark. No glow. But when she pressed her palm to his forearm, the one beneath the faded dark mark scar, the cipher flickered once, twice, then burned a deep, molten gold. Draco inhaled sharply. What the hell was that? It's not just your blood, she said, wonder edging her voice. It's your intent, your choice. It's not responding to lineage alone. It's responding to you. A stone shifted behind them, then another. The wall beside the serpent's mouth cracked open, revealing a narrow passage veiled in cobwebs thick as tapestries. A cold draught slithered out, carrying the scent of iron, and something sweet, like crushed violets and rust. Draco looked from the passage to Hermione. You really want to go in there? She met his gaze. It's calling me, and you're the only one who can keep it from tearing me apart. He hesitated, just a breath, then stepped in front of her. Then I go first. As he crossed the threshold, the cipher on Hermione's arm pulsed once, softly, like a promise. And from the darkness ahead, a whisper curled through the air, not in Parseltone, not in any language she knew, but in something older, deeper, that resonated in her marrow. Star, finally, Star, it seemed to say. Star, finally, you've come. Star. The air in the chamber was thick with dust and time, each breath tasting of stone and old parchment. Faint blue light pulsed from the walls, seeping through ancient carvings that coiled like veins across the floor and ceiling. Hermione stood barefoot on the central dais, the cipher on her forearm glowing in rhythm with the chamber's pulse, soft and urgent, like a second heartbeat. Draco stood a few paces behind, his wand lowered but fingers still tense around it. He hadn't spoken since they'd crossed the threshold, and the silence between them now was no longer hostile, but something heavier, anticipation, dread, something like reverence. It's reacting to the room, Hermione whispered, lifting her arm. The ruse shifted, rearranging into symbols neither of them recognized, looped, archaic, almost musical in their flow. It's not just reacting, Draco said, voice low. It's remembering. A deep hum filled the chamber, the light flared, and suddenly the air shimmered. Shadows pooled and stretched, then resolved into figures, translucent, glowing faintly as if lit from within. A man in a long dark cloak stood with his back to them, a serpent-shaped brooch pinged at his shoulder. Next to him, a woman with wild curls and sharp eyes held a wand carved from blackthorn. Hermione inhaled sharply. That's my great-great-grandmother, she murmured. Eleanor Greengrass. No, wait, Greengrass is on thy mother's side, but her name was never. Vespera, Draco finished. His voice was hollow. Vespera Greengrass. She married into the Malfoy line, 7th generation back. My ancestor, Lysander, took her hand in alliance after the War of Ashen Wands. Hermione turned to him. You never told me that. I didn't know, he said quietly. Not for certain. The records were sealed, burned, some say, but the bloodline, it was always whispered that our line mixed with Muggle-born magic, though we were taught to forget it. Another pulse. The vision shifted. Now they saw a younger couple, standing beneath a twisted oak, hands clasped. The woman wore a pendant shaped like an open book, wrapped in chains. The man bore a ring with the Malfoy crest, yet the crest was different, incomplete, as if awaiting a second sigil. Hermione's breath caught. That's me, she whispered. Draco's eyes snapped to her. What? Not me. Her. That's me in another life. Or another echo of me. She stepped forward, drawn. Look at her face, her hands. That's the same pendant my mother gave me on my 11th birthday. I lost it years ago. Draco moved closer, shoulder nearly brushing hers. And the ring. That's the heir's ring. But it shouldn't be on Lysander's hand. It's not complete without the second blood. The air grew colder. The visions folded into one another, century after century of faces, some bearing the sharp Malfoy jaw, others with Hermione's fierce gaze. The woman with a wand of rowan and hawthorn, whispering incantations in a language long dead. The man with silver blonde hair shielding a girl with wild brown curls from a curse that cracked the sky. Again and again their blood met, not in war, but in quiet defiance, in secret oaths, in choices that defied blood, purity, and time alike. This wasn't an accident, Draco said, voice rough. The cipher didn't choose me because of some random spell. It recognized the bond already there, in the blood, in the magic. Our lines, they were meant to meet. Hermione looked down at her arm, The runes were no longer shifting. They had settled into a single, unbroken phrase. Star, 2 roots, 1 tree, 1 word, 2 names. Bound before birth, named in flame. Star. I thought it was a curse, she said softly. Or a trap. No, Draco said. It's a promise, one we didn't make, but our blood did. Over and over again. A silence fell, thick with understanding. Outside, the wind howled against the chamber's entrance, but within, the air held still, as if time itself had paused. Hermione turned to him, her eyes searching his. Not the girl who once called him a ferret, not the boy who once called her a mudblood, but 2 people standing at the edge of a truth too vast to deny. What happens now? She asked. Draco exhaled, long and slow. Now, we finish what they started. Rain lashed against the leaded windows of the abandoned chapel in the Black Forest, each drop sounding like a whispered ward against intrusion. Hermione stood in the center of the ruined nave, her arms wrapped tightly around herself, not from cold, but from the pulse of magic crawling beneath her skin. The cipher, etched in shimmering, shifting runes only visible under moonlight, twisted along her collarbone, and down her left arm like a living vine. It had grown more intricate overnight, its patterns denser, its glow steadier. Draco stood near the crumbling altar, his wand held low but ready. His silver eyes flickered between Hermione and the ancient stone basin embedded in the floor, the one they'd found buried beneath centuries of ivy and decay. Water pooled inside, unnaturally still despite the storm outside. It's responding to something, Hermione murmured, her breath fogging in the chill air. Not just to you, but to proximity. To intent. Draco stepped closer, careful not to touch her. They've learned the hard way that contact without consent sent the cipher into violent spasms. Once it had drawn blood. Intent. What kind of intent? Protection, she said, frowning as the runes flared a soft gold. That's the root of it. Not binding, not control. The cipher, it's building toward a spell, a ward, a shield. He exhaled sharply. A shield for who? For both of us, I think. But it needs something. A confirmation. A mutual offering. That gave him pause. You're saying we have to agree to it. Not just agree. Trust. Fully. The magic here, it's old. Older than Hogwarts. It doesn't work on half measures. She turned to face him, rain dripping from the edges of her coat. It wants proof. Draco's jaw tightened. He'd spent years perfecting the art of guarded silence, of suspicion. Trusting Hermione Granger, especially now, when every instinct told him she was keeping something from him, felt like stepping off a cliff. But the cipher had saved them once already. 2 nights ago, in the catacombs beneath Prague, a collapsing ward had surged toward them, a wave of cursed energy meant to kill intruders. The runes on Hermione's skin had flared without warning, golden light erupting between them, forming a dome that held. Draco had seen the strain on her face, the way her knees buckled afterward. She hadn't told him it would happen. She hadn't known. You nearly passed out, he said quietly. Last time it activated. I know, but it worked, and it chose Star You Star to anchor it. Not me, not some ancient bloodline relic. Star, You Star. He looked down at his own hands, pale, trembling slightly. Why me? I don't know. But the cipher appeared the moment we touched that first relic in the Malfoy vault. It didn't flare for anyone else. Not for your mother, not for me alone. Only when which star touched it together. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the drumming rain and the low hum rising from the basin. The water began to ripple, though there was no wind. Shapes formed beneath the surface, faint, glowing sigils, mirroring the ones on Hermione's skin. It's time, she whispered. Draco looked at her, really looked. Not at the girl who'd bested him in every class, not at the war hero who'd stood against his family's ideals, but at the woman who'd followed him into forgotten ruins, who'd trusted him with her life more than once, even when she had every reason not to. This won't just be a spell, he said. It'll link us. In some way I don't understand. No, she admitted. But I think it's already started. He stepped forward, closing the distance. The air between them shimmered, charged with latent magic. The cipher flared again, gold and silver this time, weaving together like threads of fate. Then say it, he said. So I know I'm not walking into this blind. Hermione lifted her hand, palm open. I trust you, Draco, with my life, with this magic. I don't know what it means, but I believe it's meant to protect us, both of us, and I choose to believe in that. A beat. Then, slowly, he placed his hand in hers. The moment their skin met, the basin erupted, not with water, but with light. The runes on Hermione's arm burned white-hot, then softened into a pulsing glow that spread to Draco's wrist, mirroring her marks. The chapel trembled, the storm outside stilled, and somewhere deep in the earth, an ancient spell, long dormant, began to wake. The fire in the hearth had dwindled to embers, casting long, trembling shadows across the stone walls of the hidden chamber, beneath Prague's old alchemist quarter. Hermione lay on a narrow cot, her breath shallow, her fingers twitching against the coarse wool blanket. The cipher, once a delicate spiral of silver light tracing her collarbone, now pulsed across her torso like a living net, runes flaring and fading in irregular rhythms, as if struggling to speak a language even magic couldn't fully grasp. Draco knelt beside her, his wand clenched in one hand, the other hovering just above her wrist, afraid to touch. Her pulse fluttered like a moth against glass. "Granger," he said, voice low, rough with fatigue. "Come on, open your eyes." She didn't move. He exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair, streaked now with dust and soot from their flight through the catacombs. They'd found the third key, the obsidian shard, inscribed with the name Star, Vesperies Star, only to trigger something worse. The cipher had reacted violently, surging beneath her skin like a trapped creature. She'd screamed once, a raw tearing sound, before collapsing. And still it wouldn't respond to him, not fully. When he placed his palm over the cipher, the runes dimmed, slowed, but didn't recede. Only when Hermione stirred, even slightly, did they flicker with renewed intensity, as though they were feeding on her, as though they wanted star her. "Merlin's blood," he muttered, pressing his fingers to her neck again. Her skin was too warm, feverish, yet her toes were cold as stone. He pulled the blanket tighter, then lit a small blue flame in the palm of his hand, holding it close to warm the air around her. She whimpered. "Hermione," he said, her name slipping out, unbidden, unguarded. Her eyelids fluttered. "You're not dying on me, not after all this." Her lips parted. "It hurts, I know," he swallowed. "I know it does." The voice again whispering, in the runes. She shuddered. "It's not a spell. It's a star person's star." Draco stilled. "What? A woman? Crying or singing?" "I can't tell the difference." Her fingers curled into the blanket. "She's trapped, and she's tied to me." His stomach twisted. The cipher wasn't just magic. It was memory, legacy, something older than blood oaths. He thought of the Malfoy archives, the sealed records, the portraits that refused to speak of the Vesperous line. His mother had once mentioned the name in passing, her voice hushed, her fingers tightening around her teacup. Star, that branch was lost. Best left buried. Star, but it hadn't been buried. It had been woven into Hermione through some ancient pact no one remembered, and now it was consuming her. "I should have stopped you from taking the shard," he said, voice tight. "No," she whispered. "You wouldn't have listened either." The weak smile touched her lips. He almost smiled back, then the cipher flared, a jagged rune burning across her ribs like a brand. She arched off the cot with a cry. Draco didn't hesitate. He grabbed her hand, lacing his fingers through hers, pressing his other palm flat against the center of the spiral. Pain lanced up his arm, cold, sharp like ice cracking in his veins. But he held on. "Fight it," he said through gritted teeth. "I'm here. You're not alone." The runes slowed, flickered. For a moment, the woman's voice, distant, mournful, seemed to sigh. And then, faintly, Hermione squeezed his hand. Outside, the wind howled through the ruins. Somewhere above, Prague slept, unaware of the ancient magic stirring beneath its stones. But below, in the silence between breaths, something shifted. Not broken, not yet, but changing. And for the first time, Draco Malfoy didn't look away. The firelight in the abandoned wing of Hogwarts flickered low, casting long, trembling shadows across the cracked stone floor. Hermione sat cross-legged, her back rigid against the cold wall, fingers tracing the newest pattern that had surfaced on her forearm. 3 interlocking spirals, edged in gold, pulsing faintly beneath her skin like a second heartbeat. It had come without warning during charms class, a sudden searing heat that made her drop her wand. Now, hours later, it still burned, not with pain, but with a strange, insistent energy. Draco stood by the window, his silhouette sharp against the moonlit grounds. He hadn't spoken since they'd fled the castle together, not after the cipher flared so brightly that even Filch had paused in the corridor, squinting at her arm as though he might see something. Draco had grabbed her wrist without thinking, and the moment his skin touched hers, the runes had flared white. "Still no idea what it means?" he asked, voice low, gravel-edged with exhaustion. "Not yet," Hermione whispered. "But I've seen this configuration before, in the Black Family Grimoire, in a passage about blood memory. It's not just a cipher, it's a key. A key to what? That's what I'm afraid of." She flexed her fingers, watching the runes shift like live embers beneath her skin. Then, without warning, the room trembled. The fire roared upward, twisting into a column of blue flame. The stones groaned. Draco spun toward her, eyes wide. "Hermione," the cipher blazed. A wave of heat, then silence, absolute and suffocating. The corridor was gone. They stood now in a vast moon-dredged courtyard, surrounded by crumbling white columns and ivy-choked arches. The air smelled of salt and crushed rosemary. Somewhere distant, waves crashed against stone. "This isn't Hogwarts," Draco breathed. "No," Hermione said, turning slowly. "It's older. Mediterranean. Ancient." Her arm still burned, the cipher now fully alight, its golden script curled up to her shoulder. Draco reached for her without hesitation, his fingers wrapping around her wrist again. This time, the vision didn't falter. It deepened. Figures emerged from the mist. 2 women, standing at the edge of a marble fountain, their backs to them. One wore a deep green robe lined with silver thread, the other a russet cloak clasped with a serpent brooch. They were arguing, voices hushed but sharp. "You know the cost, Lysandra," the one in green said. "To bind magic across bloodlines, it demands sacrifice. And I am ready to give it," the other replied. "The world will forget us. Our names will be erased. But the spell must endure. For her, the one who will come after, the one with fire in her mind, and the serpent in her blood. She will need him." Draco stiffened. "That brooch, the Malfoy crest," Hermione finished, voice tight. The vision shifted. The women knelt together, hands pressed to the fountain's surface. A circle of runes flared into existence, identical to the ones on Hermione's arm. Then began to chant, their voices weaving into a single, resonant tone. The air shimmered. The fountain cracked. Blood seeped from their palms, mingling with the water. Hermione gasped as a thread of fire snaked through her veins. She felt it, the magic, ancient and deep, pulling at her bones. Draco's grip tightened. "Don't let go," he said, almost to himself. "Don't you dare let go." The courtyard began to dissolve. The women turned, just once, faces blurred by time, but their eyes, one warm brown, one cold gray, locked onto them. And then, they were back in the corridor. The fire had died to embers. Hermione collapsed forward, breathing hard, her arm now cool, the runes dormant once more. Draco caught her before she hit the floor. "Are you all right?" His voice was rough, closer than she expected. She looked up at him, really looked, past the old sneer, the guarded posture, the years of rivalry, saw the flicker of fear in his eyes. Not for himself, for her. "They'd bound us," she whispered. "Not by accident, by design. Centuries ago." He didn't flinch, didn't pull away. "Then we're not just solving a cipher," he said slowly. "We're fulfilling one." Outside, the wind howled through the towers. Somewhere beneath the earth, something ancient stirred. The air in the chamber thickened like cooled wax, pressing against Hermione's eardrums until every breath felt labored. Before them, the archway pulsed with an eerie opalescent light, its surface swirling with half-formed images. Draco kneeling in ashes, Hermione turning her back on Harry, Dumbledore's voice whispering words that slithered just beyond comprehension. The third trial had begun without warning, the ancient stones of the forgotten Valerius crypt, humming a low dissonant chord that made her teeth ache. Draco gripped her wrist, not tight, but firm, anchoring. "Don't look directly at the arch," he said, his voice lower than usual, strained. "It shows you what it thinks will break you." She swallowed, nodding, though her eyes betrayed her, flicking toward the shimmering veil. A new image formed, Draco standing over her lifeless body, his hands stained with something dark, whispering her name like a curse. She flinched. "It's not real," he muttered, more to himself than to her. "None of this is." But the chamber had other plans. The floor beneath them cracked open in delicate branching lines, and from the fissures rose silvery mist that coiled into figures, ghosts of memory or prophecy. She couldn't tell. One took the shape of Narcissa Malfoy, her voice brittle with grief. "You let her die, Draco. You could have saved her. You chose a mudblood over your own blood." Hermione's breath hitched. She saw Draco's jaw tighten, his fingers twitch at his side. She wanted to speak, to say it wasn't true, but the air itself seemed to constrict around her throat. Another form emerged, Ron, but not as she remembered him. This version of Ron sneered, eyes cold. "You traded us for him. For a Malfoy. Did you forget who you are? Did you forget who you belong to?" Tears pricked her eyes. She hadn't forgotten. She hadn't. But the doubt, the whisper that maybe she had changed too much, drifted too far, slipped in like frost under a door. Draco stepped in front of her, shielding her from the illusions. "You don't know her," he spat at the specter of Ron. "And you don't know me." The cipher on Hermione's forearm flared, runes shifting like living ink, agitated, responding to the surge of emotion. Draco glanced at it, then back at her, his gray eye searching. "It's feeding on this, on our fear, our doubt." She nodded, forcing herself to breathe. "Then we don't give it what it wants." "How?" "By choosing, right now. By choosing each other." Silence stretched between them, fragile as spider silk. The illusions wavered, sensing the shift. Draco exhaled sharply. "I choose you, Granger, even if it costs me everything." She didn't hesitate. "And I choose you." The chamber trembled. The runes on her arm ignited, not with pain, but warmth, spreading up her arm in golden pulses. The archway cracked down the center, the illusions shattering like glass. The mist collapsed into nothing, the voices silenced. And then stillness. Draco turned to her, his face pale but resolute. "You meant that?" She looked at him, really looked. At the faint scar along his temple, the guarded vulnerability in his eyes, the way his hand still hovered near hers as if afraid to touch. "I meant it," she whispered. "I've never been more sure of anything." He didn't smile, not quite, but something softened in his expression. Something real, unguarded. He reached for her hand, fingers brushing hers before lacing together. "Then let's finish this. Together." The path ahead split into darkness, but for the first time, neither of them feared what lay ahead. The air in the chamber beneath Prague's oldest cathedral tasted of damped stone and centuries of silence. Dust motes swirled in the pale blue light, radiating from the cipher now fully awake on Hermione's forearm, its runes no longer shifting but settled, interlocked, pulsing in slow rhythm like a heartbeat beneath her skin. She stood barefoot on a mosaic of serpentine silver and obsidian, the ancient design mirroring the pattern now burning with quiet power along her veins. Her breath came in shallow bursts, every nerve alight. Draco stood opposite her, one hand still outstretched where he had touched the final rune moments before. His fingers trembled. The moment his skin met hers, the cipher had flared, white gold, blinding, and then stilled. The cipher's afterword was not empty. It hummed. It watched. "It's not a curse," he said, voice low, as if afraid to break the spell a second time. "It's a ward." Hermione swallowed, her throat dry. "The ward for what?" He stepped closer, his gray eyes tracing the lines of the cipher, as though reading a story written in fire. "Not for what, for whom?" She looked down. The runes had formed a crest she didn't recognize, two entwined dragons coiled around a crescent moon, their wings forming a halo of interlocking sigils. Beneath them, a single word glowed faintly in Old High Latin. Star animasiavum star. Soul's shelter. "I've seen this," Draco murmured. "Not the full crest, but the dragons. My mother, she had a locket. hidden in the Malfoy vault. I thought it was just ornamentation. Hermione turned her wrist slowly, watching the light ripple. Then it's tied to your family. No, he said, and there was something like awe in his voice. Not just mine. Look at the moon. It's not our sigil. It's hers. A cold wind stirred through the chamber, though there were no doors, no openings. The mosaic beneath their feet began to warm, the silver threads glowing. A voice, soft, layered, like many speaking at once, rose from the stones. Star, daughter of ember and ink, heir of the unbroken line, you've crossed the veil of silence. The shield awakens. Star. Hermione stiffened. I'm not a pureblood. I'm not even your Rowena's, Draco interrupted, sudden understanding cracking through his voice. Not by blood, by soul. The Cipher didn't choose me because I'm a Malfoy. It chose me because my blood remembers hers. The shield needed a key, a counterweight, and He exhaled sharply. I was the lock. She stared at him. You're saying this spell, this ancient thing, is protecting me. Why? Because something's coming, he said. Something that knows what you are, what you could become, the kind of mind that devours magic, souls, like yours first. Her fingers brushed the skin where the Cipher throbbed. So it's not stealing my magic. It's guarding it. Guarding you, he corrected. Not your magic, not your mind, your soul. It's woven from two bloodlines, one lost, one hidden. Rowena Ravenclaw's final enchantment passed through daughters no one remembered, and the Malfoys not as allies, as keepers. The Cipher was never meant to be broken, only awakened, by touch, by trust. Hermione looked at him, really looked. At the shadows under his eyes, the faint scar along his jaw, the way his hand still hovered near hers, not touching but ready. They had fought side by side in the final war. They had hated, distrusted, survived. But this slow unraveling of secrets, this fragile trust built on libraries and locked vaults and sleepless nights tracing runes in candlelight, this was different, and yet the weight of it settled into her bones. Not a curse, a shield. But shields are forged in anticipation of war. What happens now, she asked. Draco met her gaze. Now we find out what it's shielding you from. Why it waited until you stood beside me to wake up. Above them the first crack of thunder split the night. The chamber trembled. The Cipher flared once, bright, warm, and then sank deeper into her skin, no longer visible but present, like a heartbeat beneath her skin, like a promise. The air in the hidden passage beneath Hogwarts was thick with the scent of damp stone and ancient magic, a weight pressing against Hermione's chest with every breath. The final descent had been a spiral of worn steps carved into living rock, each one humming faintly beneath their feet as if the castle itself remembered their purpose. Draco walked ahead, his wand casting a narrow beam of light that flickered across runes etched into the walls, runes that pulsed in response to the Cipher now fully coiled around Hermione's left arm, from wrist to shoulder, its silver-gold symbols shifting like liquid starlight. It's stronger here, she whispered, her voice barely more than a breath. It's singing. Draco turned to look at her, his gray eyes reflecting the Cipher's glow. You can hear it? She nodded. Not words, more like memory. As if it's trying to remember who it was meant for. He didn't answer, but something flickered across his face, something she'd come to recognize as reluctant awe. They had crossed Europe for this. From the silent catacombs beneath Prague to the snow-laden ruins of an old black family sanctuary in the Carpathians. Each location had given them a fragment, a piece of the Cipher that only Hermione could receive, only Draco could unlock. And now, at last, they stood before the final door, a slab of obsidian veined with silver, set into the wall like a forgotten tomb. The Cipher on her arm flared, warm against her skin, and the door began to move, not with force, but with surrender. It peeled open like a flower in slow bloom, revealing a chamber untouched by time. Inside, the air shimmered with suspended motes of light, and at the center stood a stone dais shaped like an open book. Carved into its surface was the same pattern that now lived on Hermione's flesh, complete, whole, waiting. This is it, Draco said, stepping forward, the origin point. Hermione moved beside him, her fingers trembling as she reached toward the dais. It's not a curse. I think it's a vow. A vow? An old one? Older than Hogwarts? Older than the Founders, maybe? She closed her eyes, feeling the cipher hum in resonance with the chamber. It's not about power. It's about balance. A guardian spell, meant to bond two bloodlines when the world tilts too far toward darkness. Draco's breath caught. He Malfoy's? And that? She opened her eyes, meeting his. The Grangers aren't just Muggle-born, Draco. My mother's lineage, her true name was LeFay, a descendant of Mordin's line. The cipher wouldn't react to anyone else, because it was waiting for star, for star, the star, for star, this star. He stepped back, his face pale. That's impossible, is it? She turned her arm, watching the runes shift. The cipher didn't choose us at random. Its star knew star. It's been dormant for centuries, waiting for the right moment, the right pair, and now it wants to be completed. What happens when it is? Hermione hesitated. I don't know, but I think one of us has to give something. Not die, but change, become part of the spell. No. She looked at him. I said no, he repeated, voice low but firm. There's another way. There's always another way. There might not be time, she said gently. The wards above are weakening. I can feel it. The balance is already tipping. Draco stepped closer, his hand hovering over the dais. Then we rewrite it. She blinked. You can't rewrite ancient magic like this. Watch me, he said, and placed his palm flat against the stone. The chamber trembled. The cipher on her arm flared white-hot, and the runes began to move, not just on her skin, but in the air between them, weaving together like threads in a loom. A new pattern formed, not just of blood and duty, but of choice, of trust. The something neither of them had dared name, and for the first time the cipher fell silent, not broken, but fulfilled. Rain lashed against the stained glass of the abandoned chapel in the Carpathians, its fractured panes casting jagged patterns of silver and indigo across the stone floor. Hermione stood at the center of a crumbling dais, her arms outstretched, the cipher coiled like a living thing, up her forearms and across her collarbones. It pulsed faintly, runes flaring and fading like breath in the cold. Her teeth chattered not from the chill alone, but from the weight pressing against her chest, a pressure that had grown heavier with every step they'd taken across this cursed mountain. Draco watched her from the edge of the dais, his cloak pulled tight, wand gripped so hard his knuckles had long since gone white. It's reacting, he said, voice low, but it's not finishing. Hermione swallowed, her throat dry as parchment, because it needs something else, not just blood, not just words. She turned her head slightly, catching his gaze, a counterpart, a willing one. Someone who shares the magic. Silence fell, broken only by the drumming of rain and the creak of ancient timber above. Draco stepped forward, boots echoing on the cracked stone. Explain. She exhaled her breath, a wisp in the cold air. The cipher isn't just a lock. It's a bond, one that requires two, one to bear it, and one to anchor it. The spell demands consent, not coercion, not force, a choice. And if no one steps forward, then it consumes me. Her voice didn't waver. Slowly, like a candle burning from both ends. I felt it, draining. Every time it activates, it takes a little more. Not just energy, memory, feeling, pieces of me. Draco's jaw tightened. He looked at her arms, the way the glowing script curled like ivy, the faint tremor in her fingers. He remembered the night it first appeared, blooming across her skin, after she'd touched the obsidian tablet in the Malfoy crypt. He remembered the way it had recoiled from every hand but his. How his own blood, smeared across its surface, had made it hum. You knew this, he said. Not accusing, just stating. Back in the catacombs, you suspected. I didn't want to believe it, she admitted. But the texts, they spoke of duality. Two souls, one bloodline split by time. Not enemies, not lovers, partners. Chosen by the magic, not by desire. He stepped closer, close enough to see the faint sheen of sweat on her brow, the shadows beneath her eyes. And you think I'm that partner? I don't think. I know. She looked down at the cipher. It only responds to you. Its star recognizes star you. Draco closed his eyes. For a moment, He saw his father's cold stare, his mother's quiet grief, the weight of a name built on pride and poison. He thought of house elves and curses, and a girl who'd once been tortured beneath his roof. He thought of duels in corridors, of sneers and hexes, and years of unspoken war. And then he thought of her hand reaching for his in the catacombs, of her voice steady when she said, "We don't have to be what they made us." He opened his eyes. "What do I have to do?" Hermione's breath caught. "You have to say it, the incantation, with me, and mean it. You have to choose this, ni, not for the spell, not for some ancient duty, but because you want to stand here, with me." He looked at her, really looked. Not Granger, the know-it-all. Not the golden girl, but Hermione, who read runes in her sleep and argued with ghosts, and still believed in second chances, even for him. "Say the words," he said, stepping onto the dais. She began, voice trembling but clear. "Stay, stanguis, non sufficit, animus, non sufficit, duos foco, ut vivimus." "Star," Draco joined her, his voice blending with hers, steady now. "Ocar ut vos foco, ut vivarmus." "Star." The cipher flared, blinding golden light, erupting from her skin, spiraling up her arms, reaching for him. He didn't flinch. He reached out, took her hands in his. The runes leapt. They burned. The air in the vault beneath Prague's oldest wizarding crypt hummed with a resonance that made Hermione's teeth ache. Dust moted through shafts of pale blue light filtering from runes carved into the stone ceiling, ancient symbols that pulsed in time with the cipher now spiraling across her arms like living flame. It had begun as a whisper beneath her skin weeks ago, faint, almost imagined, but now it burned with purpose, its shifting script reacting only to Draco's presence, his breath, his touch. He stood before her now, pale as moonlight, his wand trembling not from fear, but from the force of magic straining to escape him. "It's not just responding to you," Hermione whispered, her voice tight. "It's star waiting star for you." Draco didn't answer. His gray eyes were fixed on the cipher's newest transformation. The runes had begun to align, forming a pattern that mirrored the sigils etched into the stone arch behind her. The air thickened, pressing against their chests like a tide. He stepped forward, boots crunching on centuries-old salt scattered in protective rings. One hand lifted, not with his wand, but with his bare palm open, facing her. "You're certain this won't kill you?" he asked, voice low, rough. She exhaled. "I'm certain it will if we don't do it." Their magic had danced around each other since the cipher first awoke, resisting, then echoing, then star answering star. At first they thought it was a curse, then a trap. Now standing in the heart of a forgotten black family vault, with the weight of blood oaths and ancestral magic pressing down, they understood. It was a key, and they were the lock. Draco's fingers brushed her wrist. A shock arsed between them, not pain, but recognition. The cipher flared, golden light spilling from her skin, like liquid sun, tendrils climbing up her arms and across her collarbone. She gasped, her knees buckling, but he caught her, pulling her close, their foreheads nearly touching. His breath hitched. "Don't fight it," he murmured. "Let it star you, star us." She nodded, trembling. Together they raised their wands, not in opposition, but in unison. Hermione's holly and dragon heartstring, Draco's hawthorn and unicorn hair. The vault responded instantly. The runes on the walls blazed and the floor cracked open in a spiral, revealing a pool of molten silver beneath, shimmering with trapped constellations. The cipher star sang star. It was not a sound heard with ears, but felt in the marrow, in the pulse of blood. Words rose unbidden in Hermione's mind, ancient, guttural syllables that belonged to no known tongue. She spoke them, and Draco echoed, their voices weaving together like threads of light. The magic didn't come from one or the other. It rose from star between star them, Hermione's fierce, precise intellect, Draco's inherited command of old blood rituals, their doubts, their reluctant trust, the quiet ache of years spent on opposite sides of a war that had shaped them both. The silver pool erupted, not with violence, but with grace. A column of light shot upward, splitting into two streams that wrapped around them like serpents of pure luminescence. Hermione cried out, not in pain but in revelation. She saw, Star remembered Star, though the memories were not hers. A woman in robes of star-stitched velvet binding 2 wands with her hair. A man with Draco's eyes sacrificing his magic to seal a tomb. A vow spoken in the language of the first wizards. Star, 2 bloods, 1 light. 2 hearts, 1 shield. Bound not by kin, but by choice. Star, tears streaked her face. It was never about blood, she whispered. It was about balance. Draco held her tighter, his voice raw. Then we finish it. They spoke the final word together. The light collapsed inward, rushing into their chests, into the cipher, which glowed once, brighter than the sun, then sank beneath Hermione's skin, vanishing. Silence. The vault was dark again, save for the faintest shimmer along her arms, like the echo of a dream. Draco lowered his wand, his hand still gripping hers. "You're still here," he said, almost wonderingly. She looked up at him, her breath unsteady. "So are you." And in that moment something settled between them. Not just the spell, but the weight of what they'd done, what they'd seen. Not enemies, not allies. Something else entirely. Something bound. The air in the catacomb beneath Prague's old town was thick with the scent of damp stone and ancient incense, the kind that clung to the robes of forgotten priests and whispered of rites long abandoned. Hermione stood barefoot on the mosaic floor, her breath shallow, the pulse in her wrist beating in time, with the slow, rhythmic hum resonating from the cipher now spiraling inward on her forearm like a dying star. It had burned for 3 days, searing, pulsing, dragging her deeper into dreams of blood oaths and twin flames, and now at last it was receding. Draco knelt beside her, his hand hovering just above her skin, not quite touching. His voice was low, almost reverent. "It's fading," she nodded, unable to speak. The runes had shifted constantly since they first appeared, first on her palm, then across her collarbone, down to her ribs, each symbol a fragment of a language, neither of them fully understood. But Draco, with his family's grimoires and a reluctant inheritance of half-suppressed magical lore, had deciphered enough. The cipher wasn't a curse. It was a key, and it had chosen her. But it had only responded to him. A final rune flared, silver, then gold, before dissolving into her skin like ink in water. For a heartbeat, there was nothing. Then, from the center of her forearm, a new mark emerged. Not a spiral, not a chain, but a crest. It glowed faintly, warm as candlelight beneath her skin. A phoenix and a serpent entwined around the hollow crown, their wings forming a circle, their mouths open not in battle, but in song. Hermione exhaled, her knees buckling. Draco caught her before she fell, his arms steady despite the tremor in his hands. "It's not pain anymore," she whispered. "No," he said, voice rough. "It's something else." They had followed the cipher through crumbling chapels in the Carpathians, through vaults beneath Florence where time itself seemed to stutter, through whispered legends of the luminary, ancient magicians who believed magic wasn't born from wand or will, but from balance. 2 souls, opposite in nature, bound not by blood or love, but by choice. But Cipher had tested her, and him. It had asked over and over, "Will you trust what you hate? Will you reach for what frightens you?" And they had. "You know what this means," Hermione said, lifting her arm to study the crest. It didn't hurt. It felt like memory. Draco looked away, jaw tight. "It means the stories are true, the Malfoy line. It wasn't just about purity. There was a vow. My ancestor, Lucian, he broke it. Turned his back on the balance. The magic didn't die. It waited. For who? For someone like you." He met her eyes. For someone it could trust. She swallowed. "And you? Do you trust it now?" He didn't answer at once. Instead, he reached into his coat and pulled out a small, tarnished locket, one they'd found beneath the ruins of a forgotten manor in Alsace. Inside, a portrait of 2 figures, one with silver blonde hair, the other with wild brown curls, their hands clasped, their foreheads touching. No names, but the crest was there, faint on their sleeves. "I used to think legacy was something you inherited," he said quietly. "A name, a fortune, a grudge. But this," he touched the locket, then her arm, his fingers brushing the glowing crest. "This is different. This is offered." Hermione looked down at the mark, no longer a prisoner of symbols she couldn't read, but a bearer of something chosen. Not fate, not destiny, a decision. Outside, the first light of dawn filtered through the cracks in the stone above. Somewhere a bell rang. Soft, distant, like a memory returning. She took Draco's hand, lacing her fingers through his. His grip tightened, not in fear, but in answer. The crest pulsed once, gently, like a heartbeat finding its rhythm. Rain tapped a steady rhythm against the high-arched windows of the astronomy tower, a soft percussion beneath the silence that had settled between them. Hermione stood with her back to the stone railing, arms wrapped around herself as though holding in something fragile. The cipher still glowed faintly beneath her skin, a constellation of shifting runes along her collarbone and wrist, dimmer now, as if exhausted from their journey. Draco stood a few paces away, hands in his pockets, his usual composure frayed at the edges. "I keep thinking," she said, voice quiet, "that if we'd known what this would cost, we wouldn't have gone." Draco turned his head slightly, silver eyes catching the dim light. "But we didn't know, and we still went." She looked at him then, really looked, past the polished Malfoy veneer, past the years of barbed words and schoolyard rivalries. She saw the boy who had hesitated in the room of requirement, who had gripped her hand when the wards of the Black Vault cracked open, who had whispered an ancient counter-charm in a dead dialect, just to keep the runes from burning her alive. He had saved her more times than she could count, not with grand gestures, but with quiet choices, each one a quiet defiance of the legacy he'd been raised to uphold. "I used to think courage was knowing what was right, and doing it anyway," she murmured. "But this was different. It wasn't about bravery. It was about trust." He exhaled, slow, like he was releasing something long held. "I never trusted anyone with the family grimoire, not even my father, but I gave it to you, without hesitation. Because you knew I wouldn't misuse it." She took a step forward. "You knew I'd see past the bloodline nonsense, the pure blood mania, that I'd understand what it really was. A plea. A warning." He looked down at his hands. "My ancestors weren't just preserving magic, and were burying guilt. The cipher, it wasn't just protection, it was penance, for something they tried to erase, and now it's alive again," she said. "Through me." He lifted his gaze, sudden intensity in it, "but not because you're some vessel, because you're star. You star. The cipher doesn't respond to blood, it responds to star intent star. Trace, to truth. A pause. It chose you, and it chose me to help you carry it." Hermione's breath caught. The weight of that, of being chosen, not cursed, settled over her like a cloak. For months, she had feared the cipher was consuming her, rewriting her from the inside. But now she wondered if it wasn't revealing who she had always been. And Draco, he wasn't the boy who had called her a mudblood. He was the one who had stood between her and a collapsing archway in Prague, who had stayed awake for 3 nights translating Etruscan sigils, who had flinched every time the runes flared, as if he star, were the one in pain. "I don't want to forget any of it," she said softly. "Even the fear, even the pain, because it brought us here, to this." He closed the distance between them, slow, as if giving her time to step away. She didn't. When he reached her, he didn't touch her, not yet. Just looked at her, the kind of look that stripped away years of pretense. "I spent so long believing I was defined by my name," he said, "by what my family was. But you made me question everything. You made me want star to be something else." "Maybe we weren't meant to change each other," Hermione said, a small smile touching her lips. "Maybe we were meant to see star each other. Really see." A gust of wind slipped through the open tower, lifting strands of her hair. The cipher glowed once, soft, golden, then faded completely. For the first time in months, her skin was still. Draco reached out, then, fingertips brushing the back of her hand. "It's done." She turned her palm to meet his. "Or it's just beginning." And in the hush of the tower, with the castle breathing around them and the stars breaking through the clouds, they stood, no longer enemies, no longer strangers, just 2 souls who had walked through fire and found against all odds a way back to the light. The last rune settled into place like a key turning in a lock, and the air between them shimmered, thick with the scent of old parchment and storm-washed earth. Hermione's breath caught. The cipher, once a scattered constellation beneath her skin, now formed a perfect spiral across her collarbone, glowing faintly with a light that pulsed like a heartbeat. Across from her, Draco stood motionless, one hand still raised where it had been tracing the final symbol, his fingers tingling with residual magic. The silence stretched, fragile and full. "It's done," he said at last, voice barely above a whisper. Hermione looked down at the pattern, no longer foreign, no longer painful. It felt right, like a word she'd always known, but had only just learned to speak. "Not done," she corrected softly. Awake, he lowered his hand slowly, studying her face. "You're not afraid." "Afraid." She met his eyes. "I was terrified at first, but not now. It doesn't feel like a curse anymore. It feels like a memory, one we weren't meant to forget." Outside the crumbling stone chamber of the old Weasley ancestral vault beneath the cliffs of Dorset, rain lashed against the coastal rocks. Inside, the torches flickered, casting long shadows that danced like watchers from another age. They'd followed the Cipher's call through forgotten spells, bloodline incantations, and cryptic scrolls hidden in ancestral trunks across 3 countries. From the Malfoy catacombs beneath Versailles to the charred remains of a Scottish grimoire library, they'd unraveled a truth buried for centuries. A bond not of blood, but of intent. A spell woven not to bind, but to find. And it had found them. Draco turned away, running a hand through his hair. "My mother always said the old magic chose its heirs. I thought she meant power. I didn't think it meant this. What did it mean?" Hermione asked, stepping closer. He hesitated. "That some things are written in more than ink, in choice, in trust. In the moment you reach for someone not because you have to, but because you want to." She remembered the first time he'd touched the cipher. Accidentally, when she'd stumbled on the stairs in Prague. The runes had flared to life under his fingertips, and she'd felt it. A jolt not of pain, but of recognition. Since then, every touch, every shared silence, every argument turned into understanding, had deepened the connection. They'd fought side by side against cursed sentinels in Vienna, deciphered riddles in dead dialects, and stood back to back in the ruins of an abandoned Breton temple as shadows clawed at the edges of their light. And through it all, the cipher had grown stronger. Now, with the final rune complete, the magic hummed beneath her skin, not demanding, but waiting. "We could walk away," Draco said suddenly. "Break the circle, seal the vault, let it sleep again." Hermione looked at him, really looked. At the shadows under his eyes, the tension in his jaw, the way he still stood slightly between her and the chamber's only exit, protective even now. "And if we do," she asked, "what happens when another stumbles upon it? When someone with less care, less understanding, tries to use it?" He didn't answer. She reached for his hand. This wasn't written for Malfoys or Grangers. It wasn't written for purebloods or mudbloods. It was written for 2 people who would see past the names and find what was underneath. His fingers curled around hers, warm and sure. "You're certain?" "No," she admitted, "but I'm willing." The cipher flared, not painfully, but beautifully, gold threading through silver, light braiding with light. The chamber trembled, not with destruction, but with release. The walls echoed with whispers in a language older than Latin, older than magic as they knew it. And then, silence. When Hermione opened her eyes, the cipher had faded, not vanished, but settled, like a heartbeat returning to rest. It was still there, just beneath the surface, but no longer urgent, no longer searching. Draco exhaled. "What now?" She smiled, small and true. "Now, we decide what comes next. Together." And for the first time in their lives, the future didn't belong to their names. It belonged to them.